Good evening, and welcome to the Selectmen's meeting for Thursday, April 9th of 2015. The order of business tonight will be approval of minutes, questions from the public regarding items not on the agenda, and then we have interviews for police chief. John Nikaitis, Glenn Olson, Sean Kavanaugh, and David Jones. Appointments and Selectmen and Town Administrator reports. So with that, do we have minutes to approve? I have not read them, but if you two are happy, I'll go with it.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of April 2nd, 2015 as written.
April 2nd, you said, Paul?
Yes.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent. Do we have any questions from the public? And let me make a, okay. Mr. Arnold, as you walk up, let me restate what I said 2 weeks ago. We will not tolerate any negative comments towards employees. Don't worry. No.
Approximately a month ago, I made a proposal to you people, selectmen, town administrator, on the needs of our police department. I just wonder if any discussion has come forth, anything about putting a committee together to go over their needs and discuss it and see if we can come up with any proposals.
To be honest with you, nothing yet, Mr. Arnold, but
I'd
I'll
appreciate
tell you what.
If our town fathers could
And
take
mothers.
a close look at it, and mothers, and look at it and see where we can go. I mean, I have a lot of people questioning me now, wanting to know what's going on, so I appreciate the help.
Tell you what, we'll put it on the agenda for next week, and maybe the town administrator can talk to all three of us and see if there's consensus to put to, I think it's a good idea.
I appreciate your help.
And the chief thought it was a good idea.
Thank you, David.
Okay, Ted, can you do that?
Sure.
For us? Thank you. Okay, let's start with the interviews. John Nikaitis is first. Who gets to invite him in?
I'll take that.
Okay. And we're assuming each interview will take about a half an hour or so. Come sit.
Please, the board, I have a personal package of my employment.
Oh, my.
I'd ask that you please review it in depth, and there are some subsections and recommendations if you could take a chance to look at it.
Thank you. We'll do that after tonight. I think we'd rather put our attention on you.
I understand. I think it's a full packet. You can
I'll give it
recognize
to
I
Betty
appreciate
for safekeeping. Welcome.
Good evening, the board. Mr. Alexiadis.
Evening.
Delighted to see you, Lieutenant.
Thank you.
I always enjoy watching you on the motorcycle.
Thank you. Enjoy it.
We can tell, you're always smiling. Thank you for what you do also. We'll start off with, all of us are going to have questions for you, but why don't we start with, why don't you tell us all about yourself and why you chose to apply for the chief's job?
I am a committed law enforcement officer for my entire career. I began that career right out of high school, and I have continued forward, taking every opportunity to additionally train myself, diversify, be the best I can possibly be for the town and for myself, and for the people that I work with, under me. I'm a family man. I have 2 children, 2 adult children. I have many hobbies. I find myself satisfied with my life, satisfied with my law enforcement career. I've always enjoyed any of the events that have occurred in my life as promotion or other opportunities that I've had to pursue any endeavor in the law enforcement field, if that's what we're going to focus on. And I think I've done the very best I can. The packet I've given you will show some of that in writing as well. And, pleased to be here, pleased to be a Hingham police officer, and I'll be pleased to be a Hingham officer till I retire.
Thank you, John. Mr. Healy, do you want to start?
Why don't we take turns? I'm happy to lead.
Okay.
I suppose a certain amount of formality is appropriate here, Lieutenant, but on a personal note, I want to let the residents at home know that I had the pleasure and privilege of working with John for quite a few years, and I always enjoyed that. I'm very pleased that you chose to make your career here in Hingham, and I think you've made a real difference as a police officer for the town in ways that most people will never know. So with that,
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you a series of questions that I'm going to ask all your colleagues, so that each one of you gets the opportunity to respond, and I don't cherry pick who I ask what to.
Understood, sir.
So you don't have to call me sir, you can call me Paul.
I know, it's funny to call you Lieutenant. I know you as John.
Well, I think we can all go to first names tonight.
Thank you.
He is an LT. First question, General Law, Chapter 140 provides that the Chief of Police has wide discretion with respect to issuing pistol permits to carry concealed weapons. What conduct, in your view, would make a resident unsuitable to justify not issuing a permit?
Any statute, any felony statute violations, obviously, will do that. I know the driving under laws as well come into that. I also look at certain, I'll give you a couple of examples recently where someone failed to stop for a police officer and a chase ensued. And in fact, I find that the disobedience, that type of a regular public disobedience type action, even it may sound fairly small in someone's eyes, I find that to cause to oversight on something like a pistol permit, an LTC issuance.
Okay.
Maybe for a short term, something such as that. Any violent crime, drug crime, anything such as that.
Domestic violence?
I'm a absolutely strong proponent.
Okay.
Strong proponent. Take the tool away.
Second question, a little more general. 18 U.S.C. 242. It's the federal code. It governs a police officer's right to use force, and that includes deadly force, and the arrestee's right to be free from objectively unreasonable use of force. What tools exist, in your opinion, Lieutenant, within the department to make sure our officers use appropriate force in carrying out their duties, especially with respect to the taser and the foam baton?
As it relates to training, what tools do we employ?
The use of force.
We employ significant amounts of training for just that. We have been at the forefront in the authorization of tasers, my opinion, and you can ask, there's one officer currently on duty here that I have said on more than one occasion, that's the best tool I've ever carried. I find that to be extremely useful. It has a tremendous presence on your belt and a tremendous presence when deployed. Tasers are very, very effective. Pepper spray, things such as mace, all that we carried years ago, fine. An ASP baton, blunt force weapon, I'm more reluctant to use when given the opportunity to use a taser. But we have a very comprehensive training for firearms, use of force, defensive tactics, and I believe we are in the town of Hingham probably at the forefront on the South Shore for training for any of those items at all. We have a very, very rigorous, aggressive use of training for those types of efforts. And
Okay.
whether or not we use them every day or we never use them at all, these people are trained equally.
This one, I think, is right up your alley here. Forensic analysis played a large role in the Department of Justice investigation in Ferguson, Missouri. Where do you see our detectives in their role investigating crimes, and do you think competitive testing should play a role in the future for the position of detective?
We have changed our intake process for detectives. We recently conducted an assessment panel for each detective and a scoring, participation in scoring, and then chose from there. The ultimate result was the chief makes his decision. I think he made a great decision. Moving backward a little bit, we didn't necessarily do that. The chief may or may not have appointed the new detective for whatever reason. I think it behooves any agency to look at people's work record, training and experience, areas of knowledge or expertise that they may hold before being appointed or before putting in for a job such as that. Forensics carry a tremendous amount of weight, a tremendous amount of responsibility currently in the police world. Much more so, I mean, if we look back to the Hernandez empty shell casing with the DNA match on gum, we never tried to, and you can ask any detective that works with me right now, we go above and beyond forensically to crime scenes. We had an officer-involved shooting where every detective came in, including myself, and immediately took over that scene along with the state police. Officer-involved shooting, obviously, extremely significant event. But crime tracking for us like that, too, we can easily identify a perpetrator from a single item here and then open up to crimes that occurred anywhere in the South Shore, anywhere nationwide. We've done it in the past. We'll continue to keep doing that, and we're diligent towards that effort.
Thank you. Next question is the 911 system currently in place adequately addressing the needs of the department in terms of effectively dispatching calls for service, information gathering for intelligence analysis, and serving the needs of our police and fire services? What steps, if any, would you recommend or consider going forward in that area?
I think our 911, when you say, are you talking Shrek? You're
Yes.
talking the Shrek and the usage of Shrek.
Right.
Because 911 in and of itself is just the communication method. I think Shrek has taken its time to come around a little bit, from whatever reason that might have been. But I think what they do, intake, could be significant at times. I do find at points that they're not getting sufficient information from the initial callers, things that will help officers, and that's what you're trying to make that connection between the police department, either our effectiveness or officer safety, things such as that. Is that where, am I correct in assuming that? That's what you're trying to make that nexus?
It's a wide open question, and I'm just interested in the response.
Okay. I think they're doing fairly well. I think that they address issues. If I bring something up to the deputy or the chief, and or I may communicate that immediately to someone over at Trek, I think that is addressed. I think they recognize the issue and try to address it right away. I have never been turned down by anyone over there. I've been treated with nothing but respect by the Shrek.
Getting to the issue of identification. Eyewitness identification procedures are becoming increasingly important to ensure their admissibility in court. As chief, what steps would you take to ensure that our officers are educated in the current and evolving state of the law?
Along with their regular yearly in-service, that would routinely catch up to items that may be such as a show up on that for photos. They may touch base if something changes. I think a lot of the officers are aware of what is in place. If they need to be re-educated to some of those particular effects, the detectives are acutely aware of how we're going to do it. There are some options out there. It's not absolutely written in stone.
Is there a written advisement in place within the department?
For show-ups?
For identification?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we follow that. And then we utilize, we network out to other agencies and put in specific mugshot photo arrays and things such as that constantly. Anytime there's a chance that we can do that, we do that. And we network it out fairly. Again, I'm immediately aware of that because I am with the detective division. But even as a watch commander and in uniform, that would be my expectation regardless, never having anything to do with detectives.
Electronic weapons or tasers have replaced the use of the service baton in police work in Hingham. Identify any steps you think are necessary to monitor the frequency such device is used, including tracking of its use, to discern trends, perhaps suggesting a need for remedial training.
We do carry batons. We are still issue batons for blunt force, either an ASP or the monadnock that you may recognize as a former piece of equipment.
Near and dear.
So they're still there. The officers are allowed to carry either or both if they see fit to do so. We had some accidental discharges initially when we were sharing tasers. That has been totally remedied. All officers are issued their own taser. They're responsible for it. Sergeant Corcoran, if you know Sergeant Corcoran,
I actually do.
You best take care of your equipment. You best inform him of any disruptions of the process that you may have. In other words, an accidental discharge or anything like that. And the employment again, we're ahead of the curve. The employment of tasers, the deployment of tasers at certain scenes, and the level of force and the ladder of force that we occupy at certain times, the perception of the officer while he's in place, what he believes to be occurring, and whether or not he will deploy a taser electronic device at that time is very well trained. We have a cadre of firearms and defensive tactics trainers that are very well honed in their skills, and they constantly work with us, with the police department.
Thank you. Where do you see the trends in criminality here in Hingham, both as to type and locus, and do you think the present model with respect to allocation of police resources is effective?
I think criminality in town is based on a lot of traditional crime that we've always been dealt. There are other areas that I would like to see us work a little harder at. I'd like to see some resource allocation to the investigative group. I'd like to change the table of organization ever so slightly to properly supervise that. I think those things are long overdue. I think that they need to understand that we're constantly evolving, and so is the world that we live in.
Okay.
We never expected 9/11 to occur. We probably never expected the Boston bombing to occur. Things have changed, simply put. But in Hingham alone, I think things have changed. The demographics have changed. The amount of crime that occurs is similar in fashion to what has always occurred here, 30 or 40 years worth. But I think there are other trends and drugs and criminal activity that occur that we can't tap into because we don't have the resources dedicated to specifically that.
Speaking of changes, our traffic volume has increased. In your opinion, Lieutenant, is the policy with respect to fresh pursuit still viable? Would you alter that or modify it in any way?
We have a standard written policy for pursuit policies. It's only marked units, non-detectives, non-motorcycle, etc. I think it's a valid policy. I certainly am acutely aware of the ramifications of incidents that could occur, traffic accidents and anything like that. Would I be quick to shut down a pursuit? Yes, I probably would. More so than I would have been years ago. I've been a supervisor here for well over 20 years, sergeant and lieutenant, and I've had the occasion to do it. I've had many occasions to be involved with pursuits, depending on the time of day, the current traffic, the day of the week, road conditions, weather, etc. But I think we have to really look at pursuits and the dangerousness of a pursuit, the liability issue, and allowing them to go on without specific information, I think is nothing more than a great danger to us as a town.
This is kind of a loaded question for you, John, but we're fortunate to have qualified officers interviewing for the position of chief, you being case in point. If you were sitting in my seat and you weren't interviewing for the position, who would you see as the next chief, and why?
So out of the four, I get to choose one?
You'd have three. You couldn't choose yourself, and you were the selectman.
Thank you. That was one of those funny questions.
I told you a little bit of a curveball.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly look at the deputy chief as the next individual that would be most appropriate in my book. The man has he has experience. He has some time in his position. I think he has a handle on the general concept. I think he can do it fine.
Thank you. Our department is a young one. As chief, do you see this as an issue in the police mission? And if so, can you discuss that?
I don't think it's an issue in a negative fashion. I think it's positive. I feel as though the young group is, they're a sponge out there. They're ready to do the work. I think sometimes we disappoint them without enough work. I think there's a lot of people out there that are ready to do even more than we ask of them. And they seem to do it in a very professional fashion. We have a good, engaged field training officer program that's led us to some significantly capable officers with 10 years or less experience. So I find it, but just the opposite.
One more.
So if we do this 3 times...
Interview. This is important
Go
to
ahead.
me. I'm getting the
Fine.
hook, so you're doing fine.
I'm fine.
I'm the one she's...
Well, I should have introduced this with each of us get a half an hour to question.
Try not to
You can have
cover
as
too
long
much
as you
ground
want.
twice.
Thank you, John.
The last question.
Yes, sir.
In the recent years, the police role in the community has expanded into the permitting process, bylaw creation, schools, and community outreach such as the Citizens Police Academy. Do you see a future integrated police mission going forward with the future fire mission beyond what it is currently? Where will we be in a decade or more?
2 questions. I'll answer the first.
Sure.
I don't see us with an ESU unit. I don't see that emergency services unit. I don't see that happening. It has been discussed in a regional capacity in the past. Being along with Metro LEC, I've had the opportunity to speak about that. I don't see that happening. I don't see the fire mission necessarily engaged with the police mission at the same time. We do arrive simultaneously, and we do work together. And when
Oftentimes ahead.
and yes. And we collaborate as greatly as we possibly can. When situations arise that are unsafe for fire, we immediately determine that and set up a zone accordingly. But when we can collaborate and utilize the fire at the same time, I'm a certified arson investigator. Worked alongside several of the officers that are now rated officers over in the fire department. Very friendly, good working relationship. 10 years from now, I don't necessarily see it. You could house us together, though. That would be fine.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
You done?
I'm done.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
John, before I give it to Mr. Gannon, let me ask you one that picks up some of the threads
Sure.
that Paul was talking about. Community policing. And what is your philosophy of community policing, and how do you see it changing because of some of the things that you just brought up, the changing demographics, the change in the look and feel of Hingham? How do you see that happening in your philosophy of community policing?
I think globally, just outside the town, obviously there are indicators that show that we have to pay more attention around us. I think over the years we had proactive police work, and in the early mid-'80s, community policing began to absorb into the community and the police department together, the Citizens Academy. But we put out our bicycle unit, and we reinvented the motorcycle unit, and we put the traffic unit out there in an educational capacity, not just enforcement all the time. We need to be in the community. I can tell you, if I'm your chief, you're going to see me in the community. You're going to see me on South and Main. You're going to see me walking around. I am that kind of person. I like to talk, I like to gab, I like to hear what's going on. And if there's something bad, then tell me about it, and we'll address it. We'll address it as best we can. If I can't, I will get you a resource that can. Be it a state, federal resource, another department within our agency or town, anything at all, we can make it happen. But it's something that I think it's something that we overlook sometimes because we're focused on other things. And I think it would be remiss if we didn't push to get back into it. And community policing it's the core. It's the core of police work. It's what we do.
Good answer.
That's right.
And you'd certainly be welcome in South Hingham. Then I'll let Paul, and then I've got a few questions.
Thank you. And I can ask a few if you want to ask. And
All right.
if you're just say, John, thank you, first of all, for your service. Thank you for applying, because obviously it's important and not always easy, but maybe it is to step up and to put yourself out there for a position such as this. And I know you have 3 other colleagues that are going for it. You all seem very well qualified, and I just want to thank you for
Thank you very much.
for that. We appreciate it. Just on the, I don't want to stick to community policing, but I had a kind of question of an offshoot of that. I looked at all the paperwork, I looked at the resume and stuff, and maybe you could just tell us, in terms of, I think you've been there since 1980, and 20 years as a sergeant or lieutenant, in terms of what you've been able to participate in terms of community groups or community policing, and what you see the chief's role. You already mentioned that. I think you might be a person that's a hands-on person.
Sure.
But
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to Chief Borowski. I can tell you the last 4 chiefs have always been interested in my particular viewpoint. Going back to Chief Borowski, before he promoted to me to sergeant, I was involved with the walk and beat in the square, and I think we entertained a lot of changes down there that were making us more accessible, a more pointed presence down there, where we would be down there. In 1994, I started the bicycle unit here, became a nationwide instructor. That implements community policing probably at its greatest core value. You're out there, you're not in a police car, you're wearing sometimes shorts and a light shirt, and you're sweating and huffing and puffing, and people see you as a human, and I think that has broken a lot of barriers. I was one of the original members working on the Civilian Police Academy with Tab Mills. Worked hard at that, didn't take the endeavor. I was busy pursuing other venues within our agency at the time, but got promoted to sergeant at that point in time as well, assisted with that, tried to put that package together, and then backed off. As a sergeant, always I ask the patrol force to go the extra mile, to ask those questions of the community when they're involved with a community problem, or they're at a call or at a domestic or anything else like that. Go the extra mile. Do that work, because that's why you're here. Your service to the community is paramount. That's why we are here, until they call. And in the meantime, when they don't call, let's see what else we can do, because you're not on a dedicated call. So
just on that vein, were there any particular community groups that you were able to work with over the years that you either enjoyed or that you remember? Or, I mean, you know, I know you said patrolling and so forth, but I'm working directly with
the businessmen's group down the square. I'm going back a while, you know, but no, always active with them. If I walk down there now, I'm getting John, where you been? How you been? What's going on? I mean, I've always had that. Business groups within the town, some of the major players up here, some of the major businesses in this community know exactly who I am. Again, things that probably never get to you. You don't know really what happens or what I've done in the past. But I mean, I could boast about knowing a lot of people in this town, helping a lot of people behind the scenes, especially the business community and the religious community, the churches. Always worked behind the scenes to help them out.
And then
those less fortunate.
You make a good point, because in some respects, and I know Paul may have a better feel for, since he worked with you or close in time, but I don't know what everybody did back in 20, 30 years ago, and it's very helpful. So that's why I'm asking. I appreciate you telling me, because I don't know that side of you, because I wasn't here.
Sure, understood. Well, 8 chiefs, Mr. Gannon. 8 chiefs, and I'll continue to serve.
And I don't think this question was asked, and I apologize if it was, but in terms of the equipment, I know we talked about tasers and the batons and so forth. Is there anything in terms, as we're looking ahead, in terms of equipment that we may need that we either we don't have now or we don't have sufficient amount? I'm thinking of cameras and so forth.
That was just where I was going, body cam. Yeah, not a cruiser camera, but body cams. I was actually at a show recently, the Mass Chiefs of Police show out in Marlboro several weeks ago, and I've got 3 or 4 different R&D models lined up. We'll just see how they go. There is a significant amount of time involved with not just turning it on and wearing it, but actually the download of particular software each time you come off duty. So whether or not you would wear it all the time and engage it all the time for 8 hours, because it would run for, the average is about 14 hours of straight time at a decent pixelation. But I think there's some things that have to be worked out. Panasonic, and I've offered my services to Panasonic as well. They're coming out with one in about 2 months. I have offered some R&D thoughts for myself, because I see the biggest problem with body-worn cameras is they don't show where we need to see. When the officers are sitting, they're either wearing them too high in the epaulette and we see the inside of the cruiser or the tree line, or we see the ground and things such as that. So I think the biggest, and it's almost like a harness. You need to wear a harness, a crisscross in the front, similar to a GoPro camera, if you've seen a GoPro, that would show everything you really realistically see as an officer as you confront someone or someone confronts you. And I think seeing the few body-worn cameras that police officers have had, and some of the tragedies already that have been immediately solved when officers have been assaulted or shot and killed, unfortunately, in some of those circumstances, as well as domestic incidents. It's not all about that funnel that you see coming out of a police cruiser video. It's about what we do 99% of the time otherwise. It's not about the cruiser video. So body-worn, that would be the only thing, Mr. Gannon, that has piqued my interest, and is currently, I can walk over there and give you all the paperwork right now if you want, because it's on my desk. So.
And not necessarily, and I very much appreciate that, because that's obviously something that I'm taking note of as well. Is that something that's been discussed internally within the police department, or is it something that's gone a step beyond where they're actually looking at, obviously it's not a budgetary item, but looking at to try to come up with some type of prototype? Or?
Well, I'll tell you this. It is in our budget for cruiser video cameras. Yes. And I have expressed my concern over that expenditure for those. I would rather reallocate that money to body-worn cameras. I think the cruiser is very limited. I think it's problematic, and I think the body-worn is much better suited for what we really want to do. So I have not heard yet a response, but maybe that's just timing.
So in other words, you raised the issue, but you wouldn't necessarily...
I raised it at a staff meeting 2 months ago.
That's good.
Nice.
I hope we don't spend the money on the cruiser videos.
Now, I understand that we have a coalition of sorts on this area for law enforcement, and it may focus somewhat on drugs, or maybe in general, with other communities that we're working with.
We have multiple coalitions in this area. We're members of 3 of them generally. One, a large regional, the Metropolitan Law Enforcement Council, which is a regional response team for search rescue, search recovery, crowd control, and SWAT mission. We also have the OCPAC, the Old Colony Police Anti-Crime Unit, which is from our area south down towards Duxbury, Kingston, and we also have the South Shore Detectives Association, which really covers the entire South Shore and reaches about 40 miles west of us, all the way down through Brockton and all the way back around again. So there's three within this area that we constantly network with as coalitions of investigative services, but not just that. It could be anything. Could be anything.
And the reason why I was going to ask you the question is I know that when we were doing our coalition, community coalition with substance abuse prevention group that we have, it was discussed, at least at the forum that we had in October, but also after that, there was a coalition of law enforcement, and maybe the latter two of the two you
most likely is.
Most
likely is. Yeah.
And so I understand that obviously that there's working together to try to network, and obviously I'm focusing on drugs. Obviously, is one of my focuses to combat the regional problem of drugs.
Correct.
And I assume that it's very effective. In your experience, is there, and I'm not necessarily saying Hingham, but as part of the coalition, is there a gang component to this this problem, and is it something that we are trained in, or should we be trained in as part of our duties?
We are not trained in a gang investigative mission currently with the town of Hingham. I always make those connections and make them known throughout our agency. I am the town crier when it comes to connections. We do have some people in our area that may lightly connect to Boston gangs or outlaw motorcycle gangs in our area. And I don't mean necessarily Hingham, but the Cohasset, the Weymouth, Rockland as well, but really the contiguous towns. Obviously, the Boston contingent comes to the South Shore on occasion, and the South Shore people go to Boston and things such as that. So there is, we do not have the MS-13 groups. We don't have those other high-end gangs that would be strictly off the map as far as problems. We don't see that. Do our kids get together and call themselves a gang on occasion? Sure. Yeah, we've had a few, but we stay on them. And that's one of the things that my table of organization would address, a juvenile officer, not just the schools, but juveniles in general, and where they are in our house, basically here, in our house in Hingham, and what they're doing, and what the trends are, and to keep that person really crime mapping our juvenile issues constantly. A dedicated officer just for juveniles. The last one we had was Detective Joe Mayer, and he's been gone for quite some time. I've asked to do that. I've asked on occasion as the detective lieutenant to have a juvenile officer made specifically for that, and we just haven't quite got there yet. I think it's about time. I think our staffing level allows it.
You may have answered the question just then, but are we in need of training in this area?
In gangs?
In gang-related crimes in our region?
In our region as well, no, I don't see it. Weymouth is the only one that has a touch of that, and Randolph. Do those people come here? I haven't seen it.
Okay.
I haven't seen it. And I'm usually acutely aware of that because I'm doing the high-risk warrants in Randolph and Braintree with Metro SWAT. And those people, the first thing I do when I'm done, I document the entire scene. That is my job. I document the entire scene, any damages, all the players involved, and they go right into our master name database. I haven't had anybody come back yet that they've already been in there. So.
You want to ask something?
Yeah, let me ask him a couple. John, what is your philosophy on personnel evaluations? Do you take the easy way out, making everybody feel good, or do you address problems? And how would you handle any personnel issues that you have within your department?
Well, let me just define a little bit more about me. I never take the easy way out. I hold myself to a higher standard than everyone else around me. Sometimes that's a problem. But no, I don't. I think we've gotten away from personnel evaluations. I find it uncomfortable to not have them. I think we should. I think it behooves every supervisor to evaluate their personnel and their effectiveness every day, but not just the effectiveness of those that work under him or her, but that person's effectiveness as well. Is the lieutenant or sergeant doing their job? Because it's up to them to identify problems that occur and work with them in a progressive fashion. I don't see that we've always done that. I'm not bashful. I would be glad to do evaluations. I always did them in the past, right from the heart, 100% honesty, and 100% disclosure with the individual involved, one-on-one. So here's areas we have to work with. And very rarely do I have to call someone in and speak with them. I do find that when I'm working, people understand what's expected. I think sometimes they may say, you know what, no, John's in, best make that extra effort. You know, finish that report and spell check, etc. Get it done right and on time. So, no, evaluations are a valuable component. I think we should do them all the time. I think we should do more evaluating our effectiveness as an agency. I think staff meetings are first thing I'd start with. Regular staff meetings with the lieutenants and then on occasion lieutenants and sergeants together because they carry out my mission.
Thank you. Mr. Arnold, who's part of your citizen policing group.
Good evening, Mr. Arnold.
I'm sure you two have never met. Has made a proposal that we establish a committee to define the needs of the police department so that an objective judgment can be made whether we should have a standalone police or a standalone public service, police and fire.
Correct.
And how do you feel about his proposal?
Oh, I 100% endorse it. I will tell you that I was instrumental in moving all our stuff from Lincoln Street to here. Used my own pickup truck, along with Chief Borowski, who sat in the side passenger seat on many occasions, and we took everything from there and brought it up here. We had 500% more space, if you want to know, and within 2 years we had already exceeded the limit of everything, and we had filled it up. We don't necessarily utilize what we need to do down here on 212 Central. It's been problematic. It's fragmented. It's tough to run, and sometimes you're alone when you're in that building, and you don't have control over it. A standalone building would be the ultimate. Fenced-in lot, safe, secure. Sometimes we do let people out the front door that I don't feel always comfortable letting them out in the middle of Central Street. There is no public transportation out here most of the time. It's a secluded, fairly quiet nice suburban community area, fairly tight down here, and if these people are entitled to bail, I don't like leaving them out here. I'd prefer to have something a little bit more appropriate, like a waiting area within our compound, which would let them go when it's appropriate. We don't have a secured parking lot. We have a baseball problem, if you'll know, obviously, but that's been ongoing forever. Again, we made recommendations at the time when we were moving in here to take a little bit more of the space and push the baseball backstop back. Nick Coquinos came up with a great idea. I don't know if you know Nick, but
Very
Nick
well.
came up with a great idea, and God rest his soul, to put a pre-stressed concrete top over that to allow for stadium seating and benches and bleachers, and it would also offer us an enclosed lower parking lot. Not enclosed totally to the weather, but that would have been a great idea. What I'm getting at is this really doesn't work too well. I applaud Mr. Arnold's effort to seek new refuge for us. I would hope to see that in the next 5 to 10 years. I think that would be appropriate. A standalone would be great. I'm not sure where. I know I've heard things about South Hingham. We do need a specific amount of space, and we do have to really look at what our real needs are, and project that another 30 or 40 years, as we did with the Lincoln Street building when it was built in the 30s for 7 offices. So it served us well, and we did as best we could, but it's time. It's definitely time. I'm not bashful. A combined police and fire facility would be absolutely appropriate. It behooves you to go up and look at the Norwood one that's up in Norwood. It's a great facility. They cohabitate very well, and we are all in the same business, and do it well. But I would be fine with that, and I know federal funds usually graciously come down the pike when they put a combined police and fire type facility, where you're not as likely to get that with just a police facility.
Thank you. Do you want to ask a couple more?
In terms of your position, if you were to be appointed as chief, describe, and maybe you have, but just describe your relationship with the rank and file officers in terms of, and you've been, I think, said 20 years a sergeant or lieutenant, in terms of.
I believe I'm a respected superior officer. I am the most superior officer within the department, other than the chief. I was appointed young as a sergeant, was appointed fairly young as a lieutenant. That was about 15 years ago. I think I've applied myself very fairly, very openly. I've diversified my portfolio of law enforcement experience that has, I believe, gained the respect of a lot of the officers. I think a lot of the officers believe that I'm a can-do guy and I'm a qualified guy to get the job done. I believe the young people would benefit greatly by my position as the chief of police.
Well, I have one other question. In terms of, I know one of the questions, the essays you answered was about the opiate problem in the region, but also affects every community, including our own. Is there anything, and again, I apologize, someone asked a question, is there anything that you've seen over the last 5 or 10, 15 years that would indicate that we need to do more in a certain area, or do you have any suggestions?
Well, I'd like to see Narcan in every police officer's pocket today. Not yesterday, today at least. I think it's certainly feasible. It's not a large cost effect to the department or for training. I think Narcan needs to be out there. Needs to be out there for any first responder. I would use it regardless of what the situation was, working or not. It saves lives. I think that's immediate. As far as changes, I think the heroin opiate epidemic is even greater. It's even greater than we know. It is a tough situation. I don't know how we can best address it here. I will throw out a quick 70% of the fatalities are white, affluent males between the ages of 22 and 30. So that's the statistic. That's who's dying from opium. Those are the #1 people that are the victims. That's our demographic. I don't know how much of it is being hidden I know that when we go to a medical aid, anything at all that's an overdose, we immediately send a detective. We make inquiries. We try to find out not only what we can do for the family to help out. Hopefully they've been hit with Narcan, saved and transported. We remain on the scene and we speak with the family. We try to do that as best we can to get to the root of the problem, offer any assistance that's available out there. And the officers are aware of that. Our detectives are very aware of that, and they try to do the best they possibly can. We could always use better training. It's always something that's cutting edge, so we're always open to that.
Question about the 2 exercises that you had. Your essay was excellent. And tell us a little bit about, each of the candidates were given a 1-hour exercise with spreadsheets, PCs, calculators, pencil and paper, and told to cut their budget by 3% and then do a write-up. This is in an hour. So all of this had to be done within an hour. Can you tell us a little bit about your philosophy on that? Because I thought it was interesting.
Well, I chose to make some cuts in areas that I think have been underscored. I did cut the school crossing guards for a $67,000, I believe, cost. I cut them because I believe we need to work a little bit more closely with the schools and have them fund that. Have them fund that. And I, as the chief of police, I would either myself or anyone around me that I can assign to the task to make sure that that gets done right, that we continue to oversee. But the lump salary itself, I think, should come from the school department. I also cut an overtime budget. I cut 50-something thousand out of overtime. I believe that the overtime is sufficient enough at $350,000 with the staffing level that we have at 53 currently, that I think we can get by. I think we can get by. I took the pages away because we've been smartphone for a while. We're all set. And I also cut...
That was an interesting one.
And I also, yeah, we don't need it. And I reduced 1 secretarial staff. That's semi-realistic because we have 3 full-time. We don't really, but we kind of do right now because of a retirement of 1 in the training process. But we have like 2.5. I would adjust that half version. 1 full-time. The executive secretary, Jan, I would maintain her job, probably throw a few extra things her way, and then utilize that. And then I also put the administrative sergeant, newly appointed to that task. Perfect. Perfect focus for him. Perfect. So takes a little bit of workload off of me and the deputy, and it would work out perfect.
Excellent.
So
One last question. I stole it from the patrol officers because I thought it was a really good question. Get some interesting answers. If you could describe yourself in 3 words, what would they be?
I love work.
That's 3. Excellent.
I love family, too.
Super.
That's a better
Paul.
answer.
Sorry.
Paul, any more?
No, thanks, John. It was a pleasure listening to your perspectives and philosophies, and
you.
Your responses clearly show
I think
depth of
I
experience.
think we covered the gamut because you took the technical side, which we all know John is more than qualified on. And then between Mr. Gannon and myself, we hit all the other stuff, the soft stuff. So hopefully people who don't know you have gotten to know you a little bit.
A lot of people know me.
Is there anything you want to tell us that we don't know, or that you'd like to leave us with?
No, I appreciate this offer by the board. I obviously appreciate any townspeople that are watching or the townspeople that are here tonight. I appreciate this offer. As always, I'm a committed officer. I'll remain that way. I think I've shown that, certainly, and it's not going to change. Appreciate
Thank you, John.
it. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Glenn Olson is next. Over there.
I was going to say hello first.
Oh, that's okay. I'm thinking, where's he going?
How you doing? Larry, how you doing?
Yep.
Hi, how you doing?
Good to see you. I'm thinking you're headed for the microphone.
All right, yeah, I was going to
up a song and dance for you.
That's okay, we'll let you. No, just kidding.
You haven't heard me sing.
And do we want to?
No,
Okay.
definitely not, no.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for your service, and we're delighted to have you here.
Thank you.
We all have questions for you,
Okay.
but before we start the questions, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you've applied for the chief's job?
Okay. My family moved to Hingham in 1960. At the time I was 2, and I went through Hingham High School. I think growing up, my family was always involved in Boy Scouts. My father was a scoutmaster. My father had been an Eagle Scout. My brothers were Eagle Scouts, and I actually became an Eagle Scout as well. So I think I got instilled in me at that young age a service to the community. When I graduated high school, I actually opened up a gas station and ran a gas station for several years before coming on the job.
I didn't know that.
I think serving the town of Hingham was something that I always saw as something that I could make a difference in. And ever since I got on the police department, I've always worked to get involved in some type of role where I could instruct, I could teach, or I could make a difference in the community. I think that's, we don't always get a chance to do that. And throughout my career, I've always looked, as I went up through the ranks, I always tried to put myself in positions where I had the opportunities to increase my knowledge, work with the community, and I think it's very, I'm a strong believer in the community values that Hingham has. And working with the community as partners, and building collaborations with the people, it's really important. And I've seen, especially when I became the traffic sergeant, I got a great opportunity to work with the different boards, and that was my first exposure to the town government. And I really got a chance to see how town government worked, and it was impressive to see the amount of the different layers they have to make sure that everything is done correctly. And I think I learned a lot from that experience working with the different boards, and I continued to expand on that as I went up. I made the lieutenant, and I probably figured at that point my career was pretty much over, to be truthful with you. I sort of made lieutenant, and I said, wow, that's better than I expected. An opportunity came up to apply for the deputy chief's job, and I said, well, I think this is the right time in my life to do it. I really felt confident that I had the ability to do it, and I think I had something to offer that was worthwhile to the town, something that I could pay back and help out. The chief's job coming up now, I just continue. It's just another step in my career. I think I'm at a point where I've really experienced a lot in the town, in the community in Hingham. I've really learned to appreciate the government and the values that Hingham has. I really think that it's such a well-run organization. I'm not just saying that, but I've had the opportunity to go to schools and work with other administrators and study governments, and I think that the type of government that Hingham really runs is such a participative type government. The leadership style is participative. The management style is very discussing. It's open to bringing all and making partnerships with the community, and I think as chief that's something that I value, because I think it's very important. We're not just the police department, but we're an extension of the community, and it's important that the police department reflects the values of the community. And I think I'm in a position, if I was to be chief, to do that.
Thank you
Welcome.
very much. Paul?
Would you like me to start, or do you
Yes,
want to?
no, your questions are very good, even though we're teasing you a little bit for using all the time, but...
All right, I'll try to move along fast. Deputy, good evening.
Good evening.
I want to thank you. I want to start by thanking you for your service to the town of Hingham. For the members of the audience and those at home, I had the pleasure and privilege of working with Glenn on the midnight to 8 shift for a number of years, and I always felt I could count on Glenn in any circumstance we found ourselves in. I have a series of questions. I asked John the same questions I'm going to ask you and the other two gentlemen following up, so everybody gets the same questions. First, starting out, General Law, Chapter 140 provides that the chief of police has wide discretion with respect to issuing pistol permits for carrying concealed weapons. What conduct, in your view, would make a resident unsuitable to justify a permit being issued to them?
The laws now have really become more regulated regarding firearms. And I think that as a policy, we've been following the standard guide of what the training councils and state recommends. Unsuitability can be determined for many, many reasons, and I think one of the reasons that is definitely a non-suitable, if a person applies and they lie on the application. One of the questions is, have you ever been convicted of a crime? People sometimes will say no, and in fact they have. I think that's, first of all, a reason to really start examining whether that person's qualified if they're going to lie on an application when they know we're going to have an answer. I think some of the other things is that one of the key issues that you've really got to examine carefully are some of the issues of mental health issues nowadays. It's a critical thing. We've seen that throughout the country. That issue continues to come up. It's a difficult task to look at, though, because there's so many medical issues and privacy issues. It's something that's got to be closely examined when you do look at that unsuitability. And you do realize that once you do suspend somebody's license and not issue it, it's subject to court appeals. And I think sometimes if you do reject the license and it goes to a court and the court makes a decision and overturns you, I think that that's probably not a bad thing. That's what courts are generally for. So I think it's on a case-by-case basis. We have had a few instances where we had to revoke permits for unsuitability. We have had some problems as well this recently because as computers have gone online, we're finding charges that were coming up 40 years later that didn't exist. And some of them, just were such minor things that we had to actually suspend a couple licenses and then go through the appeals process and let a judge overturn them.
Okay, thank you. Second question. 18 U.S.C. Section 242 governs a police officer's right to use force and the arrestee's right to be free from objectively unreasonable use of force. What tools exist within the Hingham Police Department to make sure our officers use appropriate force in carrying out their duties, especially with the taser or the baton?
Well, I think that's I can imagine why you picked that. I think right now in society, we're really seeing the review of police departments and the use of force policy. It's definitely something there's going to be changes in the near future, I would imagine, as a result of everything that's transpiring. Hingham has been very proactive. The chief and I have implemented different types of programs. We've been training. We have a firearms staff that does an absolutely wonderful job. They're very dedicated to their training, and every training that we train on firearms 2 to 3 times a year. Every time that we train, they review the use of force policy. Not only do they review the use of force policy, but they also go over options because hopefully you never have to use force if you're able to de-escalate at the time, and that's something that we talk about. We've done some extensive training in the fields of mental health. Matter of fact, we just sent probably 10 officers to be educated in a couple-day class regarding mental health issues because so many of the police shootings you see nowadays often involve somebody that has mental health issues. We've also implemented less lethal training and less lethal weapons. We recently budgeted and purchased enough tasers for every single officer on the department. It's a wonderful tool for the officers. In the old days, it seemed like when you had to wrestle with somebody, you ended up in a pig pile, and people got hurt, officers got hurt, the defendants got hurt. This tool, since we've implemented them in the 3 years we've had them now, I think we've actually deployed them probably 5 or 6 times. And most of the times that they've been deployed, the family was actually thankful. A couple of families actually came in and gave us donuts, believe it or not. But they were they really were happy because they said in the past, It was a mental health issue where the person was off of medications, and in the past, they had got physically beaten up during the struggle, and this taser does a wonderful job of just incapacitating the person. So, and I think as people start to see how tasers work, you start saying, if I have to tase you, they just say, okay, well, no, don't bother, I give up. Not many people now really want to, try it out for themselves. We did go through training, and I had to do it just because the guys would make fun of me if I didn't. And it's definitely a decapacitating, that you can't fight it. It just definitely puts you down.
Yeah.
It's an amazing tool. But we've also, we're implementing, we have 3 of them right now, and we just purchased 2 more. They're a baton launcher. They're actually like what they consider a 40 millimeter gun. I think in the old days they used to shoot like tear gas with them, but they have this large rubber shell that it shoots. And we have we have one of those. When we buy the 2 of them now, we'll have them in each of the mainline cars. And they're a wonderful tool because they...
Either end of town?
Right now we have 3, so we have 1 at each end of the town and 1 in the middle. By buying 5, we'll have them out everywhere. It's a wonderful tool now, and the officers are actually getting to the situation where they're the second car in and they know there's a situation, they're actually bringing that with them. Because it gives us the ability, a taser is only good for up to 25 feet. This gives us a chance to sit back 30 yards and actually shoot at the person and stun them. And we go through, that's one of the other trainings we do with the tasers, yearly training, and it's reviewed at the firearms along with the 40 millimeter. So we're taking steps, I think, to combat the use of force and to train officers to use, proper conditions, multiple officers responding, and I think we're a little bit a step ahead of a lot of the other departments in it. I've been watching what's been going on, and I've been saying, well, if they had a taser or they had this 40 millimeter, this might not have happened. So I'm confident where we're going, and I think as other methods come out, we'll be looking at those as well.
Thank you. As you know, forensic analysis played a large role in the Department of Justice investigation in Ferguson, Missouri. Where do you see our detectives and their role investigating crimes, and do you think competitive testing should play a role for the position of detective in the future?
I would have to say I'm pretty confident right now when we do appoint our detectives. We've been setting up an interview panel. We've been reviewing them. We're fairly, they meet with we actually have a panel of 6 supervisors that goes through a similar process that we're going through now. I'm confident. But I think the biggest problem that the town of Hingham faces is it's actually a budget issue. Unfortunately, we can't have all the funding that they have in NCIC, and so we're limited on what we can do forensic-wise, and in talking to the DA's office, just to do a DNA test is extremely expensive, so we're limited on what we can even submit to what their budget is. It's unfortunate, and what happens whenever you have a budget issue like that, it's pick and choose. The big profile cases, I'm going to get it, and some of the minor cases aren't. But we are training the detectives, and they do take courses, and they do take updates every year, and part of that is dealing with forensics and recovery so that we can preserve evidence and handle it in the right way. We recently had a case involving a cell phone, and the lieutenant called me up and asked me if we had a Faraday bag, and I'm there, a what? A Faraday bag is something that you actually put a cell phone in that protects it from being deleted. Like an iPhone, the person can manually wipe it from a remote location. And it's basically a protective bag, so we actually just purchased 2 of those. So the technology is constantly changing, and it is something that we do try to keep our detectives updated in to stay current with it. But I think the biggest drawback, we just can't afford the things that you'd like to have, and neither can the state.
Next question is the 911 system, as I've called it, in place, adequately addressing the needs of the department in terms of effectively dispatching calls for service, information gathering for intelligence analysis, in serving the needs of our police and fire services. What steps, if any, would you recommend or consider going forward?
I'm glad you sort of touched on the 911 because when Chief Perino and I came in 4 years ago, we sort of were handed off in the infancy of the startup of the regionalized dispatch, and we really had to jump in with both feet and work with them. We went through a lot of bugs along the way, but we have a new computer system that we find is very helpful. It took us a while to get used to it. Like I think someone had told me, when you change computer system, it's going to take you a year to 2 years to get comfortable with it. And I found out through experience that gentleman was right. Right now, it provides us with a lot of research data. It's the way it's the system that it uses. You can draw out various information based on what's entered into it. The key to all computer systems is entering in the correct data. And I think it's working very well for us. It had its little bugs in the beginning, like everything, the whole 911 system. But the 911 system now is really working well. We're constantly working with the 911 and the Shrek Center to improve. We have feedback from the officers constantly about if there's any issues going on, and recently, I have to say, it's been very, very good, and it's just a matter of if something happens, it's usually mistakes that, I'll be honest with you, were probably made prior to the Shrek happening. I mean, there's human error involved in everything. But they are really, we have a great working relationship with them, and I think our department especially has a great working relation with them because we have been so active with them and involved with them. Working on the different committees and the boards, involved in hiring processes. We've really committed ourselves to make that work. A lot of time and effort has been put in by the chief and I, and still we go to monthly meetings to ensure that it's going, and we're actually getting to the point that they're working on the enhanced 911, which will be, for the future, which will be able to handle cell phones. And I think as we build up this system, the data and information we're able to get from it is just going to increase. So right now, I'm very comfortable with it. I think it's really working out well.
Great. Thank you. Next question. Eyewitness identification procedures are becoming increasingly important to ensure their admissibility in court. As chief, what steps would you take to ensure that our officers are educated in the current and evolving state of the law?
We currently go through in-service training every year through the Municipal Police Training Council. Every officer goes once a year. 1 day of that is spent on criminal law, 1 day is spent on motor vehicle law, and then they vary the other 2 subjects depending on the needs of the local chiefs. And that's sort of standardized across the purpose is to standardize it across the state so everyone's getting the same training. And we do try to keep, we have training bulletins going out. Identification processes is pretty much a standardized procedure now that officers have and are familiar with that guide them in the process of using photo IDs, witness IDs, and there's a standard procedure that the courts have accepted that the officers have all been trained in.
Okay, thank you. Electronic weapons or tasers have replaced the use of service baton somewhat in police work here in Hingham. Identify steps you think are necessary to monitor the frequency such a device is used, including any tracking of its use as it's been used to discern any trends that you feel may need remedial training. I think you spoke to it in some detail earlier, but if you just want to touch on that briefly.
Okay. Like the taser being an electronic weapon has some unique features into it. Every quarter, well, actually, they originally was 3 months. They've now changed it to every 6 months. Sergeant Cochran, who's our head firearms instructor, calls everybody in and downloads their taser. So there's no, we know what's happening with each taser because each taser is a mini computer that documents every time the trigger's been pulled, turned off, on or off. Officers are also required to file a use of force form every time they deploy a taser. That's even if they take the taser out of their holster and say they're going to use it. They're still required to report that. We're actually in the process of taking it a step further, and we're instituting, or I would like to institute, I shouldn't say that at this time, but we've been talking about doing it for any type of use of force. In the past, we've always reported it, but there's never been a separate form for it. So between the downloads of the taser, it really ensures that, and the officers are very compliant with it. They know from the beginning that this has a recorder in it, and so there's no sense lying. It's not that we do want to track it, because it is crucial. I mean, if we had an officer that was deploying his taser 12 times, that's probably something that I need to look at. There's definitely a problem there. So tracking things like that is really key, and I think in the future we'll just continue on the program that's recommended by the state. There is some talk about now the tasers have cameras in them. We've looked at that option. They become very bulky and hard to carry. We will be purchasing new tasers right now, so that's something we're going to evaluate to see whether it would be something that we're going to adapt. But I don't think the cost really gets prohibitive once you start putting the cameras on them. So that's something within the next year we'll be dealing with.
Thank you. Where do you see the trends in criminality here in Hingham, both as to type and locus? And do you think the present model with respect to allocation of police resources is effective?
I think that we're beginning to see some trends in areas probably that are getting more developed. We did expect some rates in crime increases as the shipyard got developed. We do see larger call volumes there. And that was something that we've tried to keep a focused look on as time moves ahead, because in this job, part of being in management and being the chief or the deputy chief is to be forward-looking and pre-plan things before they happen. And we know, and this is one of the things I actually learned as sitting on the boards as a traffic sergeant, is that when we start dealing with some of these projects, that we need to look into building infrastructure and what it's going to actually cost the town. And I'm sure as some of these developments probably occur in the South Hingham corridor and we start getting development up there, I'm sure we'll probably get an increase in workload up there as well.
I agree. And speaking of traffic volume, I know from the time that we served together on the traffic committee, the traffic volume's increased. My question to you, Deputy, is the policy with respect to fresh pursuit in this town still viable? Or is it time to consider altering, modifying it, or otherwise addressing the present policy?
I think the present policy we have is still adequate. It's a very restrictive policy. As soon as the officer enters into any type of situation where he starts to pursue after a vehicle, he's immediately required to radio into the supervisor. The conditions, the speed, the conditions, the weather conditions, anything that's relative to that chase. And I'll be honest with you, with the days of liability, and I also, the officer needs to say what he's actually chasing them for. Because that is obviously a serious, if it's just going to be because his tail light was out, well, it's really not worth it. So the supervisor makes that decision immediately. The officers are very respectful of that. And I think over the years, the issues of liability with high-speed pursuit has really been hammered in, and I think that with the policy we have just is sort of, well, is in that curve that we don't have a lot of them anymore. It's rare that, and I think the last couple of ones we've had, they really haven't been high-speed pursuits. They've just been people failing to stop. We did pursue a woman at 40 miles an hour down 3A because she couldn't hear the sirens and she didn't think it was her. When she finally was blocked out by several Quincy cruisers, she sort of got suspicious that it may have been her that they were trying to stop. So this is what you end up with. So a chase like that, where there was no problem, the woman even actually stopped at the traffic light. So those are the type of things that the supervisor would allow to continue. But by and large, they just don't take place. Not in the good, not like we had them before. I'll put it that way.
Yes, yes. Here's the curveball question.
These other ones haven't been curveballs?
No, they've actually been pretty right down the middle. We're fortunate that we have such qualified officers interviewing for the position of chief. Deputy, if you were sitting in my seat and you had to pick amongst the other three colleagues that are interviewing for this position, who would you see as the next chief and why?
Well, that's a very difficult question.
Thank you.
I actually, I would probably be torn between two officers, and you're going to make me pick one, right?
You can take the fifth.
It's your answer. You could say all of them if you wanted.
Take the fifth, Glenn. That's a legit.
No, it's a legitimate question because I do think that the officers up here are qualified, and I'll be honest with you, I would definitely be torn between John Nikitas and Dave Jones. And I think that John Nikitas came on when I came on. He's a knowledgeable officer. He's put his time in. He does a good job every time I've asked him to do something. He's performed that. Similar to Dave Jones. Dave Jones, I think, is an officer of the future. He's a younger officer. He's extremely intelligent, and he's technology-wise, he's the person that we've been looking to for technology. I've drafted him in many different projects with technology. We have a strong group of guys that, like all the younger generations, are really into technology, and they're really stepping forward when we need them. So I would have to say it would be torn between those two officers.
Well, thank you. Kind of dovetails into the next question. One more after that. The youth, the age of the department, it's youthful. As chief, do you see this as an issue in the police mission, and if so, how? Or why?
The youth?
It's a young department.
I think it's a young department, and I think that's always a good thing. I was young once too. We need to give everybody an opportunity, and I think the biggest thing is being as a deputy chief or a chief is that we generally do a lot of talking about the different generational differences in people, and how do you get one generation to understand the other. Each generation comes along, and I'm sure there was probably times that when I started this job, the generation prior to me was going, "Oh my God, what did we get? They don't do anything that we used to do." And I think that I try to tell the guys right now, it's like, listen, this generation that we're dealing with now have grown up under different circumstances. They've grown up under different media, technology. We need to allow them their time, and we need to understand that what they're doing isn't wrong. It's what we've trained them to. I mean, it's no different. I raised my children, and they're doing in that same generation. I raised them to have a better life than I did, to use technology. They don't always follow my work ethic. I was trained and taught that you work 80 hours a week. I think some of the things we're seeing now with the younger generation is they don't work 80 hours a week. They value their time off. I think, and you can probably support me on this one, as we always talk about, the most important thing is going home to your family, and family comes before job, but I regret that I probably never followed that rule. I talked it, but I never followed it. And I think the younger generation is beginning to value that time off. And it sort of scares me in the sense that they're perfectly capable of doing the job. They want to do the job. While they're here for their 40 hours, they're doing a great job. But they have a tendency to, that's their 40 hours. Not all of them. I mean, people different, and times and circumstances different. But I think moving forward as a chief, we need to account, how are we going to get the same job done with the amount of people? if I can't get 80 hours out of somebody, I'm going to have to hire more people, which means more money. And I think that's a problem. It's not just in police work, but in management and businesses everywhere. I'm sure that's a problem, because everywhere I go to, I raise it, and they say, yeah, it's the same problem everywhere. So I think that's something, but I think we do try to work through. Open communication is really important. I think we've established, Chief Perrino and I have really worked hard at being open and communicating and trying to talk to people. They'll get the job done. Sometimes they ask why, and you've got to be able to explain them why. They like to be treated the same as, they don't necessarily say, well, because you have 30 years on, you deserve something that I don't have. That's a little difference in the generation. But I think if you talk to them and you explain it, and you actually have to educate the older generation to accept the newer generation and say, don't cast them off. It's productive. We just need to learn to work together.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I enjoyed that answer. In recent years, the police role, this is my last question, in the community has expanded into the permitting process. You spoke briefly to that. Bylaw creation, which I know you're involved in with the noise bylaw. Schools, community outreach, such as Citizens Police Academy. Do you see a future integrated police mission going forward with a future fire mission beyond what is in place currently? Where do you see us in a decade or more? Are we on pace?
You're talking about combining police and fire together?
No, I'm just asking you to respond to the question.
I think the jobs are definitely different. I do think that as time goes on, policing is definitely changing. We are getting more involved, and I would classify it as social change. It's not just a job of running out, arresting people and putting them in jail. I think the evolution, probably starting back in the days of community policing, are changing us to look for solutions to prevent crimes. We need to work with the communities. We need to partner with people. We need to have coalitions and collaborations with the people, and we need to sort of look at what the root cause is and look at solving some of those. We do work hand in hand with the fire department, and I think we have a great working relationship with them. I don't think the jobs will ever cross over, though. They are uniquely different, and I could probably speak because sometimes my brother and I have unique differences in how we view things. And I think I've looked at policemen generally trained to go in and solve a problem in a limited amount of time, which gives us a wide latitude of how we handle those matters. Firemen have more protocol. They're required to go in. If there's a building fire, this is what you do. This is how you do it. This is what and it's more structure in that environment. So I don't think that the idea of crossing over, but I think the idea that we work together is crucial, because so much of the response, and one of the things that we did do last year, we actually implemented an active shooter program where we did actually work with the fire department, because we know if a situation, a tragic situation were to happen like that, that we'll be the first ones in, but the fire department's going to be right there behind us, because studies have shown that people are dying waiting for a medical aid to arrive. So I think when we brought them into that training, it was sort of an eye-opener for the fire department. They saw it. They were a little bit standoffish. Not standoffish, but they were a little bit surprised. I think, Irma, you were there.
I was.
It was a first for them. And I know that I was just speaking to the fire department as well as a couple of our officers, and they're actually doing more. The fire department's actually doing more training and working with a couple of the officers on the active shooting scenario so that they become more familiar with it. And I think as far as us working together like that more closely, that's a definite thing, because we do serve that same role. And often, especially in public, in mental health issues, we need to collaborate more. We need to definitely share more information. We lose information sometimes, and I know if we're dealing with in the ideas of suicide or drug overdoses, often we're just treating them as medical aid calls. The fire department gets them and off they go. We're losing a lot of resources by not following up on the police side of that to gain information. We need to start looking for information so that we can start to process why it's happening, where the hot spots are, and we need to work out areas with the medical field. They're not really getting involved in HIPAA and stuff like that. There's certain information that we can get related to drug overdoses or suicide attempts so that we can better focus on areas where we are having problems. And I think that's a great field where the two should blend and start to blend in the future. And I think it's going to happen, to be honest with you. The Selectmen and Selectman Gannon have recently started this coalition, and that'll be an idea that I will be talking about at that meeting.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Enjoyed hearing from you.
Glenn, first of all, thank you for your service. And,
Thank you.
As I said before, thank you for putting yourself out there and applying for the position. I know it's not always easy, and certainly, obviously, the four of you are highly motivated and qualified for the job. So
Yes.
we thank you for doing that. I just had a couple of questions. You alluded to the, I'm going to call it the FIMRA bag, which we got.
Faraday bag.
Faraday. I can't read my own writing without my glasses on. It's talk about getting old. So the bag, but that's not what the question is. But one of my questions is, in terms of equipment, is there equipment that we don't use presently that we whether it's technology or not, but that we could or should in the future be getting for our offices? And one of the things you may have alluded to is the body camera scenario. So, I mean, I'm just asking what your thoughts are on that.
There is, like and you mentioned, that technology is definitely leaps and bounds. I know there's been a lot of talk out there about body cams. I'm actually, because of the talk and the stuff that's been going on, I've already scheduled to go to a training April 27th on it. My research on it so far and the data that's available out there, it sounds like a great fix, and it's a really great tool, but no one's bothered to look at the cost of implementation, the issues of how you download the cameras, the legal aspects of downloading the cameras, who controls the cameras, who controls the data, because these all become evidentiary. How long are they kept? The storage of the data is extreme. If you don't buy the right type of camera, that's probably more affordable. That means it's going to have to be manually downloaded as opposed to electronically downloaded. There's all sorts of stuff that still needs to be learned about the system. And I think as technology goes on, I mean, it's something that we can look at. I think right now I would be more interested in moving, and we have talked about it in our budgets, is actually moving to cameras in the cruisers and to start off with that process first.
So just as a follow-up on that question, I understand, probably I'm not a technological person per se, so I don't understand how it all works, so to speak, but understanding that every police department has to overcome those obstacles that you talked about, yep. and noticing just in terms of looking at the big picture nationally in terms of policing and the issues that present themselves weekly or monthly or whenever it is, that with the issues that, in terms of what a camera may or may not show. Do you think it's worth it, though, to look deeper into getting this body camera for our police officers?
I think it's something that we do need to explore. Yeah, I mean, I think as technology comes out, we really need to examine technology, and I think that's one of the things, as police departments move forward, just in the past 4 years, we've implemented so much technology, my head spins sometimes, and I'm glad that we have officers that know how to do it. I think when new ideas come out, we do need to do some research on them, and we do need to see whether they're cost-effective to us. I'm actually pretty confident right now that Hingham Police Department is a very well-trained police department. We spend a lot of time training, and I think some of these incidents that you probably have seen happen in other places, I just say to myself, that never would happen here. We spend so much time on training and reviewing issues, and if they had options of tasers. So I think that I'm not opposed to to the cameras, but I just think we need to do a lot of more research on them before we move forward on them. And I sort of remember when the president first said that, talked about body cameras, I thought he made a promise about funding them as well. So I would certainly be looking into funding outside of our budget to probably implement something like that if we could.
And I'm going to use this term somewhat loosely, but community policing, because it came up in a discussion on something I was interested in. Just in terms of your tenure as a police officer, can you maybe just highlight some of the interactions with community groups that you remember that you think that make you qualified to become the next chief?
I think probably our shining example of community policing is the fact that we just opened up our 50th Citizens Police Academy. I started being the instructor. I was involved in it prior to being the instructor. It was started by Sergeant Mills at the time and backed by Chief Borowski. Sergeant Cochran took it over, and then I took it over after him. It's a great tool. It's great to get to know the people, and I always said the greatest thing with community policing is the fact that a lot of times we deal with the same old crowd over and over again, and you start to get a tainted view. It's really nice to talk to everyday normal citizens, get their feedback on them, and I think that every graduate, which is probably 750 from the Citizen Police Academy, walks away from that with a greater understanding of the town of Hingham, the government, and what goes into make the town of Hingham a wonderful town. That's something I've been a strong supporter of. I've been involved heavily and been the director of the Family Fun Day activity every year we do out back. I've participated. You probably see me stumbling around a basketball court every now and then playing basketball or trying to keep up with some of the the more professional basketball players. I think I actually played in a wheelchair game one time, and I didn't get the opportunity to do the donkeys on the court, but I've always, those are things that I really think are great tools. I've always stepped forward to do them anytime. Our association does tons of them. The officers are involved in them. And I think outreach like that is key to a police department's success.
In terms of, I know Paul had mentioned how it's a young force, and in terms of your interaction with the rank and file police officers, can you just tell me what type of relationship you have with them and how you'll be as a chief with those folks?
That's something that I truly, to the best of my knowledge, get along with them fairly well. I'm sure there's always that boss and worker relationship that occurs. We're very open to them. One of the things that Mike and I have done was really open up the communication lines with them. We actually, at a point where, after being in chief and deputy chief for a year, we actually brought all the officers in one by one and spoke to them for at length about anything they wanted to speak about. They know they have a policy where they can come in. And I think one of the key things that I over my tenure of being a policeman, I believe that I'm an honest person. And I don't mean honest in the fact that, in the everyday little things, but honesty is one of those things you have to develop over a long period of time. And I believe that that honesty comes through interaction with other people, because when you deal with them, you're honest with them, you give them good advice, they develop a rapport with you. I don't necessarily have to have a rapport with every single officer, but they know that if I'm going to deal with them, I'm going to be honest with them. I think over those years that I've developed I'm very credible to them. They know that what I tell them is good advice, and I think that's important. So I think that by opening that communication, and I try to communicate with them all the time. They probably don't read half the emails I send them, but I do try to update them all the time on what's going on as we approach different things. We work with the unions. I think that's key, because unions can be a very effective tool to make change. You should work with the unions. They shouldn't be an opposition to them. I think unions are always willing to make things better. I know that every once in a while, I just sent out a memo to them recently about possibly looking at changing the way we do the advancement policies, changing over to an assessment panel as opposed to the civil service test, because civil service has made a lot of recent changes, so I want to get their input and see before we decide what to do with that. So I think just by having that communication with them and being honest with them and developing that credibility over the years, I feel that my relationship with the younger crew is very good.
And one other question. You mentioned it, and I know you've been at a couple of our meetings with the Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition, Hingham, and we thank you for coming to those recent meetings. In terms of enforcement, in terms of criminal enforcement with the drug use regionally, obviously it affects our town as well, in prevention and treatment. Is there anything that you think that we can do better or do more of, or something different in terms of this area?
I think over the past few years, we've actually tried to boost up. We've actually added a detective to the department, and one of the reasons was we wanted to get more involved in the idea of drug enforcement. I think in the future, after this all settles out, and now that we have 3 new people out of the academy, there's a good possibility we'll be putting another detective up there. And I think it's important to stay on top of it. We need to know what's going on in the community. The addition of the different school resource officers, now we've completed that whole scenario. We now have one in Notre Dame, we have one at the high school, we have one at the middle schools, and we have one in the elementary schools. There's a tremendous amount of source and confidence built up in those, and I think that's a real key, not only in education, but as a resource. And I shouldn't stress, I mean, education is really key, because I think the problem to changing the drug problem is through education, and also the education of how the officers perceive it. It's critical that we realize now there's a tremendous amount of people getting unknowingly addicted to drugs. They come from good families. They're not the people you suspect. They're not considered, I think we need to educate officers to the fact that they're people in needs of service. And we experience this a lot in the changes over the years with the domestic violence programs. The way we looked at domestic violence certainly changed, but it took 10 or 15 years of education to get to the point that it has now, where people aren't perceived in a bad way. And I think we need to continue the work with educating police officers to be more accepting of the issues and find ways to offer solutions instead of just arresting them. And I think that was, I was talking about following up on some of the calls, such as overdoses, gaining information like that. So, I mean, I would love to see a system where if there's nothing that we can do legally or anything like that, we can at least send them an advocate or an assistant that may be able to offer the family help and sort of a follow-up. That's something we were able to create in the domestic violence world, where there was a circle of assistance for them, and I think that would be a great tool to work into with the same thing with drugs.
Thank you.
I'm going to pick up on a thread that both Paul Healy and Paul Gannon started.
Okay.
And thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
coming and your service. And I thought your active shooter exercise was amazing.
Yes,
And both you and the chief were very attentive. In fact, you were there all the time.
Yep, yeah.
So it was, and when the joint forces came in, it was an education, because watching the firefighters come in for the first time, their eyes were like little 3-year-olds
Yeah,
and
and
cookies. It was, and I think they have a much greater appreciation for what you all do in a situation
yeah.
like that. So, community policing. How do you see it changing over time as the demographics and as Hingham changes? And what is your philosophy on a go-forward basis for all the changes, but keeping community policing going?
I think community policing has become such a ingrained value to the officers of the Hingham Police Department. There's no way it's going anywhere, I should say that. The officers are committed to it. Most of the officers have really have grown up with it. It's something they're learning a lot earlier. I know sometimes there's some cost to it, but I think what you receive in return is great. The input, it's so great. I remember sitting as a lieutenant, and we would get calls from people that had been through the Citizens Police Academy, reporting things that they probably never would have reported before, and you recognize a name and you say, well, there was a good success story there. They're doing what we asked them to do. But I think the whole concept of community policing is going to change, because what's going to happen is that I really think that as time goes on, you're going to see the police department become more of a social agent. We're moving in that direction already. It's going to continue. The interaction with the community is key to that. We are going to be involved in social issues more than ever before, and I think maybe if we actually want to reach out there and look that, every once in a while there's social reform that comes along. We had it in the 60s where there was a social awareness, and I'm wondering if that's starting to creep in now. And I think police departments in the 60s were left standing there not knowing what to do. And I think if we stay ahead of the curve and continue to work with the community, because it's such an important aspect, and I touched on this earlier, it's really, we represent the community. We represent the town. And if we don't work together with them, we're not really doing our job, because our job ultimately comes down to that protect and serve, and it's so crucial that we partner with them, because we work together and we're a unit, and we need to stay that way. And I think that's been the philosophy of the town of Hingham for a long time.
Thank you. What is your philosophy on personnel evaluations? And do you take the easy way out, or do you take the hard way out and do honest evaluations?
We recently revamped our policy and forms that we were currently using on that. Through the last two contract negotiations, we actually adopted a form sort of similar to what the town is currently using now, and it's based on officer improvement and goal setting. I think that when you do an evaluation on someone, part of the things that you will look at are the statistics. You're going to look at raw data. The problem is that sometimes that doesn't always spell out for police officers. There's many different ways. An officer may be very effective at one thing because he chooses to do it this way, but it's very hard sometimes to rate that performance. So we came up with a system, hopefully, that will also help us improve and develop officers. But I think the greatest things about performance evaluations, it forces supervisors and management to actually not take the easy way out, but to, on a steady basis, this program requires, it's done twice a year. You set goals for the officers. They set goals for themselves. If you feel that an officer, and that goal could be if the officer is probably, you don't think he's up to snuff on something, that goal could be to work on that and get it. And it's important for me as management, because one of the things I want to be able to do is to target areas that we need to work on. And if an officer needs to be retrained in something and there's an available school, then I can send them to that school. If I didn't have the performance evaluations, I'm not able to do that. But I think also this program that we've adapted now, and I don't say we because it was a joint collaboration. The unions work with us on this, and this is what I'm talking about. It's a positive thing. That we will be able to take officers that have interest in things and develop those for future leaders. So I'm looking forward to it. We're actually, well, I was going to start it, but then someone retired, so it got put on hold a little bit. So it will be coming out. We just finished with all the contracts recently, so I've actually talked to the HR, and we're setting up a training class for the supervisors, because it's critical that if you are going to be an evaluator, you need to know how to evaluate to avoid the halo effects and the stuff that you're talking about, taking the easy way out.
Good answer. Did you cheat? Is this?
No,
See,
no.
I don't have trick questions. He has trick questions. Mr. Arnold has made a recommendation to set up a committee to do a study of the needs of the police department and potentially set up, if we build something new, a joint public safety building somewhere. How do you feel about his recommendation for a study?
I think it was actually great, and I actually commented how well he looked that night, too. First time I've ever seen him in a suit.
Duly noted in the minutes.
No, I think it's an idea. I think what's been happening is that, we are outgrowing where we are now. And there's been a lot of different talk going back and forth. And every time we start moving forward with something else comes up that might be a better option, and we sort of get put on hold. I think it's a good time where we are making a decision like this. It's generally a time that you want to look at building something and make it as efficient as possible. I think Norwell sort of just recently got there, but they ended up sort of building 2 buildings because they waited and didn't do it in the beginning. And there's a definite cost factor on that. So I think now is the time to look at a feature like that. The great thing about a police department with the technology that we have now, the idea of being centralized isn't as important to us. The officers are out in the cruisers most of the time. Their laptops, they have computers in the cars where they can write reports. We don't need that centralized location for response time that the fire department does. But I would definitely be interested in looking at a new facility for the town. And I would actually really welcome. I know every once in a while, and I think it's not a bad idea. The chief and I had discussed this years ago. There was an MMA report done on the Hingham Police Department that I've recently. It's still in the drawers, and I've looked at that numerous times, and I've seen the changes that were made as a result of that study. It never hurt to have professionals come in and look at something and give you recommendations on future goals, and I actually would welcome something like that. I think I'm always willing to look at something. I can be stubborn sometimes, but I'm always willing to look at it, and if it makes sense, then I don't see a problem with it. So I would welcome a study in a joint station.
Thank you. Your essay was excellent. You covered a great deal of ground.
I had a tough time fitting it in, but I got to do it.
You did. And I think you've set new standards on margins. I didn't know we could print that, but it's very good. It's very comprehensive. You covered an enormous amount of ground on that essay.
Thank you.
On your 1-hour exercise, tell us a little bit, because that really was quite challenging.
Yeah, it actually was, and it wasn't so much the budget stuff. I fully understand, and I think that the problem I have is my fingers aren't really. I'm still at the 2-finger typing method. I've never really developed into a full type. I elected to put mine on an Excel spreadsheet where I was able to actually punch in the formulas, so that once I came up with the different budget items, all I had to do was look at what I wanted to change. And I know in budgeting, there's certain items that we can't change because they're contractual. It would cost you'd have to renegotiate. There's fixed costs that go beyond us. So we had to look at the items that were available to cut. And I wanted to make a choice right off the bat. What was the goal that I wanted to reach? And my goal that I decided I wanted to reach is I wanted to maintain the services to the town that I'm already maintaining. And I think that was crucial. I didn't want to cut personnel. I thought there was ways to save 3%. And I know I can remember being in charge of the union. We actually sat down with Chief Borowski back in the days that we had some budget cuts. And the union act, we worked with him, and we actually made cuts and trimmed. And it's funny because some of the trims that we made are still in existence today. As far as training and education, we really sort of agreed on the issues of comp time, officers taking the ability to take comp time as opposed to overtime. When we used to go to training 5 days a week, we would get paid overtime on our days off. That was one of the things that the union voluntarily said, well, to make this work, we can save money here. We'll actually take comp time so that if I have to go on my day off, I'll get a day off later on. So, and that's still into effect today. So there are compromises you can make, and I think when I was looking at this, I sort of remembered those days, and I said, let's sit down with the people, talk about what we can do, and look at ways we can cut without eliminating people. So I would have liked a little bit more than an hour. I got my spreadsheet done, but typing into the Word, I was adding some stuff on Words. I really didn't get a good chance to explain why I cut where I cut and what my philosophy on that was.
I think you just did.
Well, thank you, yeah.
I agree.
One last question. This one I stole from the patrol officers when we interviewed, because I think it's a really interesting question. If you could describe yourself in 3 words, what would they be?
This is written on my board every day you walk in. Honest, integrity, and forward-looking. And I talked about being honest already. It's a belief in developing integrity is key. People have to be able to trust you, and that's another thing that takes time. Forward-looking, you need, especially sitting as a deputy chief or chief, you need to be able to project out into the future. And when you're projecting out into the future, you need to sell that image. You become a salesman, unfortunately. If I don't walk the talk and all that kind of stuff, if I don't look enthusiastic about what I'm saying, I don't reinforce every single day. And that's one of the reasons I put it on my whiteboard, because I noticed that I write a lot of other things on that board. What I have to do, my to-do list, maybe things that are in the future. And I noticed that every time an officer comes in to see me, his eyes slowly but surely drift over to that board. So I said, I moved on my to list to the far end of the board and put those 3 words right there, so that every time they come in there, they're going to see that. A few of them ask me what they're for, and I'm there like, good, you're reading, you know. Stop reading my board. No. So it's something that I think you've got to practice that. As managers, you need to reinforce that constantly. Those other core values are something that people look for you to follow. And that's what I say, that honesty factor is something that you have to live every day. You have to do it over a period of time. That integrity is done over time. You need to sell that image. You need to present yourself in that way. Thank you.
Is there anything else you would like us to know, or anything you'd like to say?
No, I'd just really like to thank the board for this opportunity. I really have enjoyed working with Chief Perrano. I would almost probably say it's been the highlight of my career. Mike and I really got along well. There wasn't anything that, whatever happened, we both knew. I knew it was my role to always be supportive of him, even if I disagreed with him, which wasn't much, to be honest with you. And I really will miss him, and I sort of wish, to be truthful, that he stayed a little longer. But I think that...
We all do.
But I think that, you know, I started this job, and I just, when opportunities came up, I decided that it was time for me to move on, because I felt there was something for me to offer. And I feel that way now. Now is my chance to offer more. And I thank you for the opportunity of listening to me. I know I can be a little long-winded at times, but thank you.
Thank you very much. Glenn.
Well done.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Well, we kind of blew it on the time. David assured me. That's it. This is very important. You don't pick a police chief every day.
That is absolutely true.
Nice to see you. Sean, Lieutenant Kavanaugh, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
We're all going to get to ask you questions tonight, but before we do, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you'd like to be chief.
Well, I've lived in town for 18 years. I'm married. I have 2 children. They're both at the high school. So we spend a lot of time between the house and the high school. I know the route very well. So, but I started with the police department in '02. And shortly thereafter, I got into the traffic division. In 2005, I was promoted to sergeant. And in 2010, I became a lieutenant. So over that time, I've taken on many responsibilities in the police department. Presently, I'm the juvenile reporting officer. I'm one of the firearms officers, and I'm also the keeper of the record, which entails a lot of testifying in court at OUI trials. So I'm responsible for the breathalyzer, maintenance, testing, et cetera, and so those responsibilities, I feel, are pretty extensive and have, in a way, I've shown that I'm willing to take on those responsibilities and challenge myself, move forward, and for me, the chief's role is the next step. So I've tried to do that when I can.
Thank you. Paul?
Good evening, Lieutenant. How are you today?
Thank you. Good.
I'm going to ask you a series of questions that I've asked Lieutenant Nikitis and Deputy Olson, and I will ask Lieutenant Jones as well. There's no right or wrong answer. I just want to see what you have to say or share with the townspeople your views on certain questions. The first one is General Law Chapter 140 provides that the Chief of Police has wide discretion in issuing pistol permits to carry concealed weapons. What conduct, in your view, would make a resident unsuitable to justify not issuing a permit to them?
So being firearms, obviously the state sets the standards for disqualification for carrying firearms. So there's a list of disqualifiers that are out there that says if your criminal history suggests this, then you can't have a license to carry a firearm. And we obviously pore over those records if someone was to have one. And if you're disqualified, there's disqualifiers for Class A licenses to carry versus firearms identification cards, which is a separate issue, which some people qualify for firearms versus firearms identification cards versus Class A licenses to carry. So the state's sort of done away with much middle ground there. But as a police chief, you can disqualify someone based on suitability. And so we look at those issues where we may have been in contact with someone on a frequent basis and feel as though this is not the type of person we want to have carrying a firearm around town. And so if you can establish that this is a person that we think is probably unsuitable, it's at your discretion to not issue that license. So if behavior, and there are several people around town who we deal with on a regular basis, but not in criminal activity, but we deal with them. And they're out there, and most days there's no issues. But there are those periodic times when we deal with them, and they would probably disqualify, and the chief has the discretion to do that.
Thank you. 18 U.S.C. Section 242 is the federal statute governing a police officer's right to use force and an arrestee's right to be free from objectively unreasonable use of force. My question to you, Lieutenant, is what tools exist within the department to make sure our officers use appropriate force in carrying out their duties, especially with respect to the use of the taser or the foam baton?
So officers are trained in the use of force continuum that right from the academy, in service every year, and to make them aware of when are the appropriate times to use a level of force. So if the perceived threat is at a lethal force, then you're allowed to draw your weapon and use lethal force. In regards to the taser, it's obviously a non-lethal situation, but it's reached a level where it's a combative situation where you feel as though it's necessary. There's an aggressive context to it in order to meet that level of force that you have in front of you. You're required to use the taser. So obviously nothing can do. Common sense and verbal skills will always trump the use of force if it can be avoided. And we try to emphasize that with new recruits, is that you have all these things. You have a baton, you have a taser, you have a firearm. All those things are great, but your verbal skills will go a lot further than all those things, most occasions.
Thank you. Forensic analysis played a large role in the Department of Justice investigation in Ferguson, Missouri. Where do you see our detectives in their role investigating crimes? And as chief, do you think competitive testing should play a role for the position of detective? So
I think our detectives are well trained. They do a good job. They respond to most calls that we have in town that they're capable of handling. I think the level of training and capabilities that they have certainly reaches a certain level, though, where, there are some instances where we feel we need to bring in outside sources like BCI from Plymouth, let's say, or the state police. So could they expand their role as far as forensics is concerned? I'd like to think they could, but on the day-to-day that we use our detectives for, sometimes it's not completely necessary. But as far as competitive testing, I'd like to see something for detectives. It's an esteemed job in the police department, and very sought after position. There's a lot of young guys at the department, and they're looking to move upward and wherever they can. And so if you can provide them with an opportunity to get to the detectives division on their knowledge and some testing ability, I think it's a good thing.
Thank you. Is the 911 system in place adequately addressing the needs of the department in terms of effectively dispatching calls for service, information gathering for intelligence analysis, and serving the needs of our police and fire services? What steps, if any, would you recommend or consider going forward?
So I think Shrek has done a fairly good job with the tools that they've been given. They're sort of lumped in there in almost like it was in a hurry. It seemed that way to me anyway. Maybe it was a long, drawn-out process, but when we finally took that step to get everybody sitting down in the Shrek, it seemed like it was in a hurried fashion, and so they hadn't really established protocols and things that might be overlooked as time has gone on now. So they do have a supervisor over there, and they do have a system for complaints, et cetera, that happen on, they're infrequent, but they do happen. And so there's been times when people have been dispatched to the wrong street in the wrong town. And that is a safety issue. There's no way of saying it otherwise. When you're dispatched to Main Street in Cohasset, the incident is on Main Street in Hingham, you have a problem. So whether or not we probably cannot turn back the clock on Shrek and say, let's re-examine this. We have what we have. And so we need to, if there's a problem, we need to fix it. If it means that supervisory staff from the PDs and the fire department need to go over there, sit down every once in a while and sit down for a shift and see what's going on over there. There's plenty of things that we can do to try and refine what's going on and fix whatever needs to be fixed.
Okay, thank you. As you know, eyewitness identification procedures are becoming increasingly important to ensure their admissibility in court. Generally, though, as chief, what steps would you take to ensure that our officers are educated in the current and evolving state of the law?
So as far as identification goes, right now we're using a system where there's 9 rules for establishing a bring back or a show up on an identification. So the officer, we've given those rules to all the officers to use when they go out there and do an identification. So an officer will bring a victim back to where we have 3 suspects detained. And those rules, on the way over to where we're going to do that show up, we tell the person, number 1, these may not be the people. We're going to investigate this crime to the fullest. With those 9 factors, sort of eliminate a little bit of the, I guess, the array of different tactics that people use on a identification. So when all the officers are aware of those standards and the rules, it's easier to make that process and it's obviously easier to prosecute a case. So sometimes we probably are a little short of making sure everyone has those rules in their duty bag and they're ready to go at a moment's notice.
Are there forms?
We do have it on a form. I don't know if we've really formalized it, so to speak, but I know we have given them out in the past, though. We've made sure that every officer has one, or at least we've put them in the mailboxes, and hopefully they've gotten to the right locations.
Okay. Electronic weapons or tasers have replaced the use of the service baton in some cases in police work here in Hingham. Can you identify what steps you think are necessary to monitor the frequency of such a device, including any tracking of its use, to discern trends that may give notice of the need for a remedial training?
So tasers are one of those things that thankfully we've developed a policy around tasers, and when you draw your taser, whether you deploy it or not, you're to write a use of force report. And surprisingly enough, the use of the taser, if we pull our firearm out, we don't have a use of force form for a firearm, but we do for a taser. So it's just one of those things. It's odd, but and tasers also have downloadable memory that you know what happens, and you know how long it's been used. And officers know this, though. They know, if you get your finger on that trigger of the taser, you should know that it's recorded. And so the tracking, so to speak, I guess, we could look to other towns who have tasers, see how often it's deployed versus what our, how frequent our deployment is.
Thank you. Where do you see the trends in criminality here in Hingham, both as to type and locus? And do you think the present model with respect to allocation of police resources is effective?
So I think one of the trends that we're seeing is a lot of online activity, a lot of identification theft, a lot of kids going home and using Facebook to threaten another kid, a lot of cyber offenses that are happening. And so, of course, they don't have a locational trend in town. They're everywhere. And so combating that is also difficult. And one of the things I'd like to see is an officer who is strictly dedicated, or at least has a fair amount of training in cyber crimes, in securing warrants and removing computers from homes and cell phones, because we've encountered that more and more, that we've needed to take cell phones, and just as of lately we've done it a few times. And so we were a little deficient on the process and securing warrants, and there's always templates out there to use for search warrants and things like that, but it's one of those things where I'd like to see an officer strictly dedicated to that function.
Interesting. I agree with you. Our traffic volume has increased. Is the policy with respect to fresh pursuit still viable? Would you alter or modify that policy?
I would. Our policy, I can't remember off the top of my head the miles per hour, let's say, that's in the policy. I looked at it just recently. But one of the things that's it's probably little known in policing is that the pursuit of suspects in a motor vehicle is probably the most dangerous law enforcement activity that there is. Just because of the threat to the officer, the threat to those people that are in the vehicle, and the threat to the public. So that's probably the number one dangerous activity that police will engage in right now. So we need to revisit, the policy is a little dated, and when it's acceptable to pursue. As a supervisor, I will tell you that I just really don't allow it to go on very often. There's been a couple of pursuits, or at least there's been a couple of pursuits anyway that I can think of off the top of my head where I've just ended it pretty quickly. I'm not...
Over the year?
Yes. And I'm not a fan of them at all, and I would prefer they just don't exist. But it does happen, and there are occasions when you're going to be pursuing something for a very serious felony that is going to require that type of activity. So there's constant communication that goes on during those types of events. It's essential that the shift commander is aware when they're happening and when he just feels as though they've gone too far. But certainly revisiting the policy definitely needs to happen.
We are fortunate to have qualified officers, including yourself, interviewing for the position of chief. If you were sitting in my seat and you had to choose one of the other three candidates, who would you see as the next chief, and why?
I'd probably... I think I see Glenn Olson. He's in the role of deputy chief, but more importantly, he is, and I will say, he's a dedicated police officer, and he wants to see this police department move well into the future. He's dedicated in that respect, that he wants to see us succeed.
Thank you. Our department is a young one. As chief, do you see this as an issue in the police mission, and if so, how?
Well, there's a couple of things about young officers that come to mind, I guess. One of them is we're a community policing organization, and the focus of that is involving trust in the town. And recently, there's sort of a trend in the militarization of police and how they perceive the public. So there's sort of forces pulling at one another there in different directions. We're talking about the way we train now and the way we perceive things. And 15 years ago, we didn't train for school shootings. We never trained like that. So now we focus a little more on that, but we also need to focus on the other end of it. So they need to know what our goals are, what we're looking for them to do day to day. And so, and again, obviously, these young guys are looking to see, is my future, do I have a bright future here? Can I stay here and make this place right for me? And if you make them feel that it is, then they'll stay here. They need to feel that, though. They need to feel that what they do is important every day.
I agree. My last question, Lieutenant, is no right or wrong answer. In the recent years, the police role in the community has expanded into the permitting process, creation of bylaws, schools, community outreach, such as the Citizens Police Academy. Do you see a future integrated police mission going forward with a future fire mission beyond what is in place currently?
Well, one of the things that, when I was a sergeant and moved into lieutenant, one of the things that I'm proud of is Project Lifesaver, and it was we had the system in place. I'd like to get back to it in the future. It's an electronic monitoring bracelet that we use to locate either Alzheimer's or special needs people, autistic kids and things of that sort. So I'd like to see us get back to it. The technology sort of became a little dated, and with the system that we have, so we had to get away from it. LoJack now offers a better solution, but what we did was, in that system, was worked with the fire department in training and on this particular, because the fire department's always out in the community, the police department's always out. They can help us in that respect of finding someone. If we can help them in some way, then we can, we're happy to do it. And so there is a collaborative there, even day to day, on what we do. As far as a joint public safety, I don't know if that's really a viable thing as far as, we both work for the same organization, but we do in a sense. We're both public safety organizations. So there is interaction there, and there can be some cross-training that, can be examined.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Welcome.
Paul?
Thank you. We've been referring to everybody by their first names, if that's all right, Sean.
By all means.
I want to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for coming forward, and as I've told everybody that I know that it's not always easy to put yourself out there, but we appreciate not only what you do for the town, but putting yourself out and applying for the position. And I will say, we have something in common. We both have 2 children in high school, so it's interesting in itself, but we're blessed.
Yes.
I know that. And one of the questions I was going to ask you, maybe you could expand upon it. I was talking about kind of an expanded community policing question, and what I was really looking for was, what you did as a police officer, and obviously individually, but as a police officer in the community with different groups. And I did see, just looking at community service that you put in your resume, which was something that I was looking for. And you have an extensive involvement in sports with the children, maybe your own and maybe others in the town, and obviously I share that. But and that's commendable. I think it's fantastic. And that's one of the things I was looking for in my question. But is there, you can speak about that, or could you expand upon that in terms of what your interactions were with groups in the community as an officer? Or
So I've had a few occasions to work with groups in town. Sports obviously is a big one that I've done over the years, but I have worked with the Merchants Association, Rotary on events that have, 4th of July events that have happened. Christmas in the Square, those types of things. So I've had at least some interaction with those outside groups, and I go to the school frequently. A couple of weeks ago, I had done a law day up there. We did Fourth Amendment stuff with probably the whole 8th grade class, so it was a great time, and I appreciate going up there. But sports is kind of my big thing, and I love coaching, and football was probably, I think it might be coming to an end for me, but it was always, I had a lot of fun coaching football. I had a lot of great guys that I've met over the years, and parents that I've met over the years in town, just in doing that. And to get their perspective on the town and how things work in town is, I have, that's sort of what I have that maybe other applicants don't have. I have that interaction in town. I have, an investment in town that have been here as long as I have, and I've done those things that I've done as far as coaching and other things that you have that, you get that perspective from other people about how town government works, how the police department works.
Invaluable. One of the other questions I had was, and it's come up, and it's obviously appropriate time-wise in the country, but just in terms of our department, is there equipment that we could use to make our force better or more efficient, or in terms of protecting the public? And one of the things I think of is the body camera. Just what your thoughts are? Is there anything we could get?
Well, as far as body cameras are concerned, they do the trend of body cameras is that they reduce the number of complaints and they reduce the number of use of force situations. So that could be on the part of the officer or the person that you're dealing with in the public. So they do tend to show that reduction. But probably what body cameras don't show is that critical point in time when you have that camera's on and you might have to draw your firearm to use it. Is there some hesitance there that will keep you from acting? And so there's probably you can't study that. You can't put a number on that at all. So whether or not they have that effect, I think it's yet to be seen. So as far as the body cameras, I guess, they have their pros and cons. I think, as far as what we could use them for, I'd prefer dash cameras in the cruisers versus body cameras. But as far as other equipment, I would like to see police presence on the water. And if it's something that we can examine and look at, potentially getting it. And I know Kenny does a great job down there, but if we're really thinking about expanding the harbor and the attraction that we're bringing to the harbor, is something that is putting the police on the water something that we can do and maybe make young guys, get them out of that role of just assigning them to a sector every day. They go out, write some tickets, if they see something that, might attract them a little bit, might, pursue other avenues in the department, I think it'd be a good thing.
Do other communities, because I don't, have a presence on the water down on the South Shore?
I think Quincy and Weymouth do. I'm not sure whether or not they're a dedicated harbor master, or I know other towns that do water communities on, down the Cape, et cetera.
There's been, I guess, discussion that the force is a young force in terms of age. Can you just tell us what your relationship is with the rank and file officers and how it may be as a chief?
I think for the most part, officers think that I'm a fair supervisor, but they do recognize me as somebody who I have sort of an authoritative presence, but I also I'm willing to praise somebody. If they're deserving of praise, I'm more than happy to give it to them. If they're deserving of discipline, unfortunately, I'm one of those people that does that too. So when the biggest problem in a department is one that you ignore. So if you let things go and build up and they just become bigger and bigger. So officers know that I confront problems and I solve problems. But they also consider me to be a fair person.
And my last question, I noticed, as you may know, I'm involved in the Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition in town, and I did notice that you made a reference to it in your essay answer to the opiate
Yes.
epidemic that's going on, and I appreciate what you put in there because it was very extensive in terms of facts and so forth. So it told me that you are well-versed in that area in terms of it. What else can we do in terms of treatment and enforcement that I'm not saying we're doing anything wrong. Obviously, I think we're doing a great job. Is there anything else we can do to better serve the community and protect the community and assist the community in terms of treatment enforcement in that area?
Well, one of the few things that we have that really the public is aware of is whether or not they believe there to be an opiate epidemic or whether or not it's a problem in our town. They may not know that because a lot of crimes, you might have somebody in the station, and we found this happens many times. We bring somebody in on another charge. So we have them in booking, and lo and behold, they have some Suboxone, they have some Oxycontin or some heroin on them. And so they really don't know the extent of, there's some drugs out there floating around in our community. And so how we attack that is, there's several ways we can do it. And as I said in my essay, that we could have a substance abuse coordinator. And one of the things that it is giving information and resources to the people who really suffer from addiction, and letting their families know there's a place that you can that can get help, whether it be the court or outside resources. What's one of our jobs is, as a public safety agency, we're responsible for these types of things, is to let people know the resources that are out there to help them. Aside from that, one of the things that public frequently sees, though, is needles in the street. And so, we have to find a way to sort of combat that, and whether or not we, develop a way to turn in needles, just strictly needles versus medication. We do medication in the police department, but I think local pharmacies could help us out in that respect. If we had some kind of drop in the area where something was secure for needles, and because unfortunately, many times what people do is they use in a particular area and then just discard the needles in wherever they are. And so, for fear, and it's still not widely known out there that needles are legal to possess. So frequently people think that if they have needles, they could get arrested for needles, but they really can't. And the Good Samaritan law is also one of those things that people don't really understand. You need to educate people in how to go about dealing with people, whether it be family or otherwise, how to deal with the problem. And in the Good Samaritan law allows you to pick up the phone, call 911 and say, I have an issue here. And you'll be free from that sort of liability, or that being charged by the police department, and if there's something in the house that we could act on. So those things exist, and we need to sort of educate the public. We also need to carry Narcan, and I know it's been examined all over the South Shore, and whether or not, I just think it's inevitable that we should be carrying it. Just a matter of time.
Thank you.
Sean, thank you very much. And I've enjoyed the couple times we've gotten to work together.
Thank you.
I look forward to more. I'm going to pick up the threads from a couple of the questions. Community policing. What's your philosophy on community policing going forward with the changing demographics in Hingham? And how do you see Hingham changing with community policing?
Well, one of the things that, obviously the shipyard is an enormous, just looking at it and looking at Linden Ponds, you roll into Linden Ponds, it's still in Hingham, you don't think about it, but those demographics have changed in a sense that and I guess in a way, people in the shipyard and Linden Ponds are sort of isolated in that respect from the police department. I think we need to find better ways to get in there and, really think about the things that affect them. I know with seniors, they're very often subject to scams, phone scams and things like that. And obviously we put out an e-mass about the different ones that exist in town, and, whether they're alerted to it or not. But we need to really look at those particular areas. And I think the shipyard, they represent a different sort of group of, things that could, subject to the police department, would draw attention to the police. But I think Linden Ponds is one of those areas where we could really, as far as community policing goes, help them with the issues that affect them.
Thank you. What is your philosophy on personnel evaluations? And you kind of answered this a little bit. Will you take the easy way out or give an honest view to each person, and how will you handle personnel problems?
Well, I think right now our evaluation process is not effective, and we need to really examine it, because we sit down once a year, we write an evaluation about an employee, and we haven't done it in a little while, but it sort of goes to the goals that, obviously officers are 20 years officers. They know what's expected, and they know the evaluation process. And we need a concrete evaluation process to write down on paper, here's the things that we've seen over the years, but also we need to, I think, informally meet with the officers, all of our officers, in going up the chain of command. So if we met with officers, say, once a month informally and said, look, these are the 3 incidents that have happened over the last month that we could do a little better on. These are the 3 things you did great, and you deserve credit for that. But I think we lose something in that time frame over the course of a year. It sort of dissolves, and if you address it, 6 months from now, it really doesn't have that punch that it does, And of course, if something was drastic enough, I'd do it on the spot as a supervisor. But some of those things, the little things, if we met with officers more frequently, we'd probably be able to dissolve some of these things that come up. But I will say, as a supervisor, I don't think, as far as personnel issues that have come up, I am always right out there in handling personnel issues. It's just my nature and my work ethic and the way that I approach things. I just want things handled right now. And that's just the way I see personnel issues. And I think, in a way, you put yourself out on the ledge a little bit when you work like that. And I do that, but I'm willing to do it.
Thank you. Great answer. The 2 exercises that you did, I agree with Mr. Gannon. I thought your essay was very good, and you covered a lot of ground, and then condensed it nicely into a relatively few pages.
Thank you.
Now, the 1-hour exercise. Tell us about that. How'd you approach it?
Well,
you did a great job, by the way.
Thank you. But it's just having an hour time frame to approach a budget, I guess, is difficult in a sense. And not having done much budget work in the past, all I had sort of left to do is look at those things that are most glaring on a line item, and figure out where are those places that you can make a reduction. So overtime obviously is a glaring issue, and where we can take overtime, but it really needs to be examined in total in the department, how overtime gets established. Because I think, in a sense, when let's say we do training, or guys go to Metro and we backfill their position in the regular shift, then it doesn't really appear that way on a line item overtime in the budget. So to say that's whatever, not 400,000, you don't know exactly where that money is going, and how can we reduce it. So Metro being one of those ways that we may be able to make a reduction in overtime. And it's great that we belong to that organization, but how much money are we really allocating towards backfilling shifts and training and things like that? But if we look at those areas where overtime it seems a little excessive, I think we could find ways to condense it, whether it be overlapping investigations between officers and detectives and things like that. So, and obviously there's the other issues that are on the budget, office supplies and things like that, they seem a little glaring, but one of the issues being in QED, once QED started, we were going through reams of paper because...
QED, for those at home, that's the system that's part of SHREC.
Yes. And it's used in the police department for collection of calls and data and dispatch. So when QED started, we were going through a significant amount of supplies, data, just daily. And as time has gone on and we've sort of refined that, we find it's a little less, but I think it still could be, cut down. So I tried to think of those areas that, at least a little more glaring that I could say, well, we can do better here.
Thank you. One last question. If you could describe yourself in 3 words, what would they be?
I would say I'm honest, I'm fair, and I'm a dedicated employee to the Hingham Police Department.
Nice. Do you have any other words for us? Anything you'd like to leave us with?
Well, I think, again, as I said, I've taken on a lot of responsibility at the department. There's probably no one that you could really point to, obviously, other than Glenn, who has a massive role, but as far as what I do day to day and my responsibilities and how I approach them, how I approach working with officers, and I also want us to be a successful organization, move forward in the future and get better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Sean.
Lieutenant.
Awesome. See you.
Well done. Thank you.
Okay, David Jones is next, and he'll be our last candidate.
Hi, how are you?
Hi there. Join us.
Thank you.
Lieutenant Jones, thank you so much. Thank you for your service.
Oh, you're welcome.
And we all have questions for you.
Okay.
But before we do, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you've applied to be chief?
Sure, well, reason I applied to be chief, I'll start with that, is I think I can make a difference here. We have one of the best police departments in the region, and I definitely want to be a part of its future success. A little bit about myself. I grew up in Hingham. I was fortunate enough to attend Hingham schools and graduate from Hingham schools. I went on to get my associate's, bachelor's, and master's in criminal justice. And actually, most recently, I was accepted to Northeastern University, their graduate program for master's in public administration, which I look forward to starting later this year. So, the police department, I've been involved in a lot of different areas, aspects of the department, such as a field training officer. I've been assigned to the traffic division, accident reconstructionist with them, a drug recognition expert for them as well, as a firearms instructor, taser instructor, and I also run the Citizens Police Academy in town, which is a great program. I know you're well aware of it. And I took over that program from, then Lieutenant Perino, now Chief Perino, when he got promoted, and took over the program from him. And other than that, I'm assigned to the relief shift, which is, as a lieutenant, which is 2 4 to 12 shifts, and then 2 midnight 8 shifts. So I get to see a little bit of everything.
Wow. Thank you, and I was there when you kicked off the 50th, it's hard to
Yes.
believe, the 50th
That's amazing.
Citizens Police Academy.
And every class is full, too.
And there's a waiting list because you have to
Yes.
cut it off,
Yep, absolutely.
which is fabulous. And for the public, they've never lost a student yet when they
We have
go
not,
off down to
no.
the prison.
It's definitely true.
Well, Mr. Healy.
Thank you. Lieutenant, good evening. I know it's late, and I appreciate your patience.
Oh, no problem at all.
I want to congratulate you on your significant academic performance here. Having gone to graduate school while working on the police force, I know the sacrifice that is.
Thank you.
And I have great admiration for your dedication. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, sir, 11 in total. Each of your colleagues has been asked the same question in substantially the same form. So it's really to give the residents watching a sense of, the candidates' views on different issues that I think are of interest to the public. The first one, sir, is General Law, Chapter 140, provides the Chief of Police with wide discretion in issuing pistol permits to carry concealed weapons. What conduct, in your view, would make a resident unsuitable to justify not issuing a permit to them?
I think, obviously, it's a big responsibility for the chief, being the ultimate decider on that. Obviously, certain crimes, felony convictions, obviously a domestic is an automatic disqualifier, restraining orders, and also I'd say significant mental health issues would also be a disqualifier.
Very good. Federal law 18 U.S.C. 242 governs a police officer's right to use force, but also the arrestee's right to be free from objectively unreasonable force. What tools exist within the Hingham Police Department to make sure our officers use appropriate force in carrying out their duties, especially with respect to the taser?
Well, with respect to the taser, the equipment itself has a sort of self-policing. It records every time it's activated for how long and which method of deployment. Either you can use it as a contact weapon, or you can use it as a deployment of the probes. So the unit itself actually tracks if it's deployed, for how long it's deployed, and in which fashion it was deployed. And those are all saved right on the taser itself, which is then downloaded on a regular basis to a computer that we have, and it's all tracked and saved. So I think that the taser itself, there's a very good tracking mechanism built right into it from the company, Taser International, and I think that that in itself polices the use of taser. The officers also have to do a use of force form whenever they have any use of force, specifically the taser. Even if they take it out and display it, the taser, and activate, it has a laser and a light on it. If they activate that, they have to do a use of force form. So it's a way for the department to track the use of the taser, and even in that scenario where they didn't deploy it, but they took it out and displayed it, we're able to track that and keep tabs on it.
Forensic analysis played a large role in the Department of Justice investigation in Ferguson, Missouri. Where do you see our detectives and their role investigating crimes, and do you think competitive testing should play a role for the position of detective in the future?
I definitely do. There's a lot of officers that really want to be detectives and get into that field. I see there definitely needs to be some sort of a competitive basis to promotion into specialty positions like that. I was actually part of the last detectives interview panel, so I participated in it. There was a panel of rated officers and a detective that were on that panel, and the chief and deputy chief also sat in. So I did take part in that. I would like to see that expanded, and definitely there needs to be a competitive selection process for that, because it is such a specialized position. The officers need to be dedicated to it. They need to prove that they're committed to that type of work and that they're going to follow through and have some substantial background that they can bring to the detective division.
Thank you. Is the 911 system in place adequately addressing the needs of the department in terms of effectively dispatching calls for service, information gathering for intelligence analysis, and serving the needs of our police fire services? What steps, if any, would you recommend or consider going forward?
Well, the Regional Dispatch Center has been in place for a number of years now. I think initially, as with any large transition like that, there's bound to be some problems, some personnel issues, some communication issues. It's a brand new system in a brand new location. But I think now all those issues have been pretty much worked out, and it runs very smoothly. The staff up there, I think, is very capable. The dispatchers, they're able to communicate very well and relay information to us. Everything up there is recorded, which is great. The phone calls, the radio transmissions, everything. So there's accountability up there. The management staff there, the supervisor on the shifts, it's always approachable. If you have an issue, you're always call up, talk to them, and resolve the issue, usually right there with minimal disruption. I've found them all to be very approachable. We work very well with them. We're right downstairs, but we're really a world apart because we don't have direct interaction with them. But I find a lot of times that as an issue is arising, that the dispatcher themselves or the supervisor will call down as they're putting the call out to the officer in charge and give us a little more background on it and seek some advice on how they want us to handle the call. So I think it's working out well.
Thank you. Eyewitness identification procedures are becoming increasingly important to ensure the admissibility of IDs in court. As chief, what steps would you take to ensure that our officers are educated in the current and evolving state of the law?
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, it's very rigid, the IDs that we do with either like a bring back or a show up type identification. We would bring a victim of a crime back to the scene or bring the suspect to them. And the photo ID, there's very strict requirements to that. And we have it downstairs in our office where we have the policy and the ID procedure down there. So if there ever is a situation where we need to do that, we always have a little time. It's not something that has to be done right that second. So we have a little time to get that in place. We'll send that down to the officer if they don't. Most of them already have it in their bags with them out on the road. But if they didn't, we could get it back down to them and ensure that policy is followed. It's a very specific policy as to what you can and cannot do to influence that person's identification.
To remove the claim of suggestibility?
Correct, yes.
Next question, you kind of covered it already, but electronic weapons or tasers have replaced the use of the service baton back in the old days, police work in Hingham. Identify steps you think are necessary to monitor the frequency such a device is used, including any tracking of its use, to discern trends that may need remedial training.
Yeah, as I said before, the taser itself actually is a great tool where it tracks its use, its deployment. Once that is downloaded, it's basically evidence and can be used in a crime. If you deploy the taser, there's many little ID cards that shoot out with it when you deploy it, and those are all over the scene. So if there's multiple officers there, you could tell where they were when they deployed the taser. So, evidence collection, the officers are keenly aware of it. We go through the training with them. As I said, I am an instructor, so we do the training with them in conjunction with the firearms training. And they're all taught that, and they know that because we demonstrated to look for those little ID tags and to collect as many of them as they can. They're unique to that taser cartridge. And as I said before, even if they display the weapon and activate it, the light of the laser, that is a use of force, and they're mandated to do a use of force report. So we can track that, and we can track an actual deployment. They should have fired an incident report if they deployed, obviously, and a use of force report, but then also we would get that when we do the download of the taser back at the station. They do that on a regular basis. So the taser is really very trackable. It's not something that you can use and no one find out about.
That's interesting. Where do you see the trends in criminality here in Hingham, both as to type and locus? And do you think the present model with respect to the allocation of police resources is effective?
I do think it's effective, yes. As far as the trends, obviously, we wrote about it in the essay. Opiates is a big, and it's across the nation, not just in this region. It's a big problem, and I would like to see a little more focus on that. Not necessarily the enforcement end of it, because I think we do a good job of that already, as far as the dealers and things like that. But I think a lot more in education. I think we could deviate some attention towards that, educating people on the law, on the treatment that's available, programs that are available for them. And also, if their family member was affected, we could also get them some guidance and some support for them to then maybe help their family member.
Thank you. Our traffic volume here in town has increased. Do you think the policy with respect to fresh pursuit is still viable? As chief, would you alter or modify that in any way going forward?
I think our current policy is a good policy. It's restrictive in when you can, and very specific as to when and what you can chase. There's very specific guidelines on situations that have to be met before you can allow a pursuit to continue, and when you have to discontinue the pursuit. So I think, and that takes into effect, the policy takes into effect the safety of not only the person that's being pursued and the officer, but also the general public, which obviously we need to be mindful. The supervisors are very aware of the policy. We have it next to us at the desk downstairs, so if there is a pursuit, we're on top of it and we're able to maintain radio contact with the car. And if at any point it sounds like it's getting somewhere where it shouldn't, we can immediately discontinue the pursuit. So I think the policy that we have is good. I wouldn't be opposed to reviewing it and seeing what else is out there. There's always a chance to improve things. and I don't think we're immune from that. So I think it might be worth a fresh look, but I am comfortable with our policy right now.
Okay, thank you. This is the curveball question. Everybody got it. We're fortunate to have qualified officers, including yourself, Lieutenant. Your submittal was most impressive, I have to say.
Thanks.
Interviewing for the position of chief. If you were in this seat and you had to pick amongst the other three, who would you see as the next chief and why?
Amongst the other three,
Yes, sir.
I would say the deputy chief. I think he has I've worked with him on a number of projects, and I think he has a very good understanding of the department and the officers within the department. I think he has his finger on the pulse of the department and knows what's going on, sort of behind the scenes. And I'm very comfortable working with him and for him, and I suspect everybody else is as well. So I would say the deputy chief.
Thank you very much. Our department is a young one. As chief, do you see this as an issue in the police mission, and how?
I see it as a positive issue, actually, because the younger officers that are coming on, as you can tell, I'm big into education, and the officers that are coming on now are all very educated. They've all gone to college. They've all pursued some sort of training beyond high school. So I see it as an asset, where in years past it wouldn't be necessarily a requirement or a preference that somebody has a degree from a higher education. Now it is, and they know that they're expected when they're applying for the job here. They know how competitive this job is. I mean, you take the civil service test and you're waiting two plus years to even get a phone call. So they know how competitive this job is, and if they want it, they know that they have to go out and further themselves and get education. Obviously that benefits the department, having an educated police force, and certainly those young officers and being younger and being educated, I think is actually a benefit to the department. And they bring a lot of new ideas with them also, which is always good.
Final question, and then a brief comment. In recent years, the police role in the community has expanded into the permitting process, creation of bylaws here in town, the schools, and community outreach such as the Citizens Police Academy. Do you see a future integrated police mission going forward with a future fire mission beyond what is in place currently?
Absolutely. I think there's always room for growth. I have an intimate knowledge of that because I'm in charge of the Citizens Police Academy, obviously. As part of that, when I took over, I also integrated the fire department with us. So we actually go over to they were there before, but now we actually go to the central fire station on one of our days. We do the canine demonstration over there. They do a demonstration with the Jaws of Life. They do a tour of the fire station, show the equipment, the ambulances, and everything else. So we're expanding the regular Citizens Police Academy, to include a lot more initially than we did. I think moving forward, there's a lot of different areas that this community policing can become involved in. We have a traffic safety division, very successful program. We respond to resident complaints of speeding and everything else, quality of life issues for them in neighborhoods. If you have speeders, people blowing stop signs, the traffic safety division could be used a lot more to integrate those officers, directly into the community and address their issues specifically. I'd love to get the mountain bikes back out there. That would be huge. I'd like to see them in the parks, Wampatuck, Bear Cove Park especially, Stoddard's Neck. So much foot traffic down there and you can't get a cruiser in there. I think that's something that has to happen. It's not an option at this point. And I really think that bringing the bikes back online, more than right now, they're out for parades, 4th of July, things like that, crowd control events. But I think that a lot more interaction with them is certainly benefit the community as a whole. The motorcycles is in the area. People love the motorcycles. If you're driving around, the officers driving down the square, see the kids and everything else. I think that's a big builder with the community, having that out. They can also incorporate, do speed enforcement, traffic enforcement as part of that patrol also. I also see, or I would like to see, the administration becoming a lot more involved in the community. I picture myself in the future at some point, if I was administration, to be And if I go out for a coffee, instead of driving to the drive-thru at Dunkin' Donuts, actually getting out of my car and walking into a local shop and you know, interacting with the people in there. I see myself eventually, you know, working with the officers directly. I don't think it should be a surprise if you see the chief at midnight at roll call for the officers that are coming off the 4 to 12 shift and the officers that are coming on. I don't think it should be a surprise if the chief backs up an officer in a traffic stop, if he's in the area. I think it's good that the officers see that the community sees that the chief is directly involved in not just the administration, but also the day-to-day operations of the department.
I worked for a chief like that a long time ago. You know, I'm going to pass it off to my colleagues, but I'd like to say to the residents of this town, we're extraordinarily fortunate to have the high-quality caliber police officers that you've seen tonight, and I certainly appreciate it. I hope everyone in town does, because we're very, very lucky. So thank you very much, Lieutenant.
You're
Great
welcome.
job.
Thank you.
Paul?
David, thank you for your service. First of all, I want to make sure I say that, and thank you for coming forward and applying, because it's not always easy, as I've been telling everybody, as I know, for people that do things like this, apply for a position of this caliber. It's not always easy to do it, but, you know, if you're dedicated and motivated and you're comfortable in doing it, which you all seem to be,
Right.
we're really appreciative, as Paul said, of everybody's efforts, but I wanted to thank you personally.
Well, thank you. That's good to hear. Thank you.
I was looking at your resume, obviously, and I know it came up and just in conversation earlier that I'm very impressed not only with your education, which is important, obviously, but with the technology background that you have. I could only wish that I could have half of the credentials that you have, and that would be even being generous, saying half. So it's very impressive, and obviously in today's world, today's technological world, it's very lucky to have you in that respect.
Oh, thank you.
I will say also that one of my questions had to do, and you brought up the opiate epidemic, and as you know, I'm involved in the Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition in town.
Yes.
And one of the questions was you know, what would you do or recommend that we do in terms of, in addition to what we do now, enforcement, education, treatment, and you touched on it, and I want to thank you for, you know, for doing that, because it's not that I wasn't going to ask the question, but I wanted to point out that you were already on point, and I know you did an essay on that as well.
Yes.
And so it's really important to me to know that this is an important topic for you.
It absolutely is, yeah. It affects everybody in one way or another.
It sure does. So one question I had was just in terms of equipment. We've talked about different things, and it's kind of wide open. Is there anything that we need in terms of equipment or even technology that we don't have presently? And one of the things I've just suggested for comment would be the body camera, but I obviously want you to talk about whatever you want.
Sure. Well, as you brought up, I am really into technology, the computers and everything. The police department is definitely going that way. Like I just explained, the taser is computerized. Everything we do is computerized now. The days are long gone of using a typewriter to type up an incident report or doing it by hand. So everything's on the computer. We have computers in the cars, computers at the station. The roll call's done with a computer printout. Everything's tied into the computer. Technology is really, really part of the police department, and you really can't really ignore it. So, I mean, does that sort of answer what you were looking for? Or
I just didn't know, is there anything that we're missing in terms of equipment that, you know, in terms of that we could use, you know, like a wish list or something that might be helpful?
I mean, one thing, the body cameras, I think, do I see it going that direction? Yes, but I don't think the technology is really there yet. They're still big. They either require them to be worn on the officer's, you know, their front pocket or under a lapel, and they're pretty big and pretty bulky, and they're also very expensive. As far as a wish list, I would absolutely love to see us get the cruiser video systems back. We had them for a number of years. They failed. We had the old VHS ones that were in the trunk. There was a giant vault in the trunk. And, you know, as they broke down, they were never replaced, and eventually they were just phased out completely. So we have one car now that has a video camera in it. I mean, personally, I think it's underused, but I would love to see video cameras in every single vehicle. It protects the officer, and as well protects the citizens out there, obviously. So there's a huge benefit of accountability. with a camera. I think the cruiser cams would definitely be at the top of my wish list.
And I've been asking people in a broader sense of community policing, and I mean involvement in the community as well. And I noticed, obviously, you mentioned the Civilian Police Academy,
Right, yeah.
which is fantastic. And I also noted that growing up in Hingham, I know you were with the Boy Scouts and Eagle
Yes.
Scouts. I commend you for that. It's fantastic. I think Glenn may have been as well, so we have two. And
Eagle Scouts.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. But in terms of, is there anything else that you may be able to tell us in terms of either as an officer or in general that you've been interacting with groups in the community?
Yeah, I mean, the Citizens Police Academy is a huge program that we do. Not only do we bring the people into the police department and introduce them to our job, they also get to meet the officers personally. They go out in a ride along with them. They go out in the cruiser with them and go out in a shift. So they get to see what the officer, talk to them, get a sense of what they're doing and why they're doing what they're doing. We bring in all sorts of different groups to talk to them. Like this week coming up, we have some officers that do internet safety and computer crimes that are coming in. That's a new program that I brought to bring everyone up to speed, because fraud is a huge issue, and most of the fraud now takes place on computers. People get emails. You can spoof a number from a computer and call somebody and make it look like you're calling from the town of Hingham, for example, or any place. So we bring in that training to the people to educate them on that. We do a trip to the jail, as you mentioned. We haven't lost anybody or brought anybody extra back, as the chief likes to say. We bring them to the gun range. We really immerse them in what we do. And the other thing I should mention is the officers that do the Citizen Police Academy, from myself all the way down, everyone volunteers to do it. Nobody's assigned to do the Citizen Police Academy. Everyone volunteers. The night that we do graduation here, all the officers are here on their own. You see a huge line of officers escorting people in to congratulate them on the program. Everyone volunteers for that program. It shows how much the department itself is committed to working with with the community. So I think that the continuation of the Citizens Police Academy is very important. And I also mentioned that we could do other things to get people back in the community. The mountain bikes, I think, is a big issue that needs to be revisited very soon. Get them back out. People always comment when we do put them out, how nice it is to see the officer in the park, to see the officer riding the bike through the square. And they're not tied to a cruiser. They can hear things differently than you would in a cruiser with the windows up. They can interact with people. The kids will be out there on bikes. They can talk to them. I mean, it just brings a whole new dimension to what they do when they're out in patrol. And that opening up that training, getting the officers back on those bikes would be a big priority for me to bring community policing a little bit further than we are right now. The motorcycles I mentioned and the administration, the chief and deputy, I think that it's important that they're out there too, that people see them, that the officers see them, that the community sees them on a daily basis, and not just at town meeting or the officers don't just see them when they come in the door at 7 and if they're here for a meeting, see them later, but they should expect to see the administration around at all hours of the day and night, because the officers do work every single night, 365, holidays, weekends, everything. So it's nice that they see their bosses there, so they can say, oh yeah, he does remember, he used to be here, and he knows what it's like. So I think it's a morale booster for them, and it would also then in turn affect the officers and their vision, and that in turn pass it on to the people that they work with in the community.
Last question is, in terms of, you could just tell us what your working relationship is with the rank and file officers, and how that would be, what would it be like as a chief? Would it change? Would it be good or bad? Just could you let us know?
I mean, it would obviously change. My position would change. Right now I have a direct supervision over a shift, and the officers are working for me. Obviously the chief's in quite a different position. He's in charge of the entire department, including the supervisors. So it would have to change. My interaction with people, they have to understand that, and they do, you become friends with people on the job. Anyone that's worked in police work will tell you, you become friends with everybody that you work with. You become really close. But as you move up, to sergeant, to lieutenant, there has to be a little separation there, because you can't be so close that you're not blinded by, but you're influenced by your friendship. You can't let that happen. So they have to know that when you're at work, you're the supervisor. and outside of work, but they also have to be comfortable coming to you and discussing any problems that they have, whether on the job or off, because it'll affect them while they're on the job. So your position, yes, will change. Your relationship, I think, has to change with the rank and file. But not in a bad way, in a good way. You want them to look up to you and respect you and be able to, you want to be approachable, obviously, and you want, but you want that respect there, that there has to be a healthy respect in the division between the supervisors and the regular officers that work the street every day.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
E-turn.
Okay.
I really want to thank you very much for your service, and your resume is very impressive.
Thank you.
And I also want to thank you for getting into Northeastern.
Oh, yeah.
That's not that easy to get into. It really isn't. It's a well-known school and well-respected across the country, so congratulations. Community policing. What's your philosophy on community policing as Hingham changes, the demographics change, and as we move into the future?
I think obviously the community policing model that we use needs to change and adjust to any changes that occur in the community. But like I said, we didn't have a computer crimes and safety course in the Citizens Police Academy before, but there's a need for it, so we'll bring that in. And anything that we see, I'm always asking the officers before we start a class if they have any new ideas to bring. We're looking at, for example, like I mentioned, the fraud cases, and we see an uptick in that. That's where we start looking to bring some education to the community in that fashion. So I think that community policing philosophy has to change as the community changes. Another good example would be the Derby Plaza wasn't there before. There were some stores there, but now we have the Derby Plaza, we have the Shipyard, we have the Square area. We've got so many different areas in town that require that community presence. And I mentioned the bicycles could easily be deployed in any of those areas, as well as the parks, which I think is very important, and the motorcycles as well. And we can really keep that interaction and that personal face to policing that is really needed. And I think no matter which area you go in, if you don't have that, the department's not going to succeed.
Now, would you use the bikes down at the harbor? There's an awful lot of ground to cover down there.
Yeah, there is, but a bike's very mobile. They're able to go through the parking lots and things easily. And like I said, they've got a huge advantage over a car, where it could be a traffic light or something like that. The bike can get into a parking lot and go through the parking lot, and just really have people don't expect a policeman to roll up on a bike. So and they're able to hear a lot more. They can see a lot more than concentrating on driving. They're really immersed in the area that they're in. So I think the bikes could be valuable anywhere, and they can easily be moved all around town. You can we have the racks for the back of the cruisers. We could drive them and deploy them anywhere, in Liberty Pole, up in South Hingham at the plaza, down the harbor, wherever we need them. And I think we should have a presence in all those areas.
Next question. What's your philosophy on personnel evaluations? And would you take the easy way out, or would you do an honest view of each person, and how will you handle personnel problems?
I think we absolutely need personnel reviews and evaluations. I think that not just in policing, but anywhere, you need to have some sort of documentation of your employees, what they do well, what they don't do so well in. If there's any corrective action that needs to be taken, it's documented. If there's any additional training that they need, that's documented. So I think the personnel evaluation system is very, very important, and it needs to be honest. If it's not honest, it's not fair to the officer. It's certainly not fair to the people that work with them, and it's not fair to the community. It needs to be an honest evaluation, and definitely not the easy way out of just checking boxes and that's the end of it and giving them all excellent. I think that's a recipe for disaster. I think there needs to be accountability, and there needs to be an honest, open evaluation policy. And I think the officer would actually embrace that.
Thank you. Good answer. Mr. Arnold?
I do, yes.
He's made a recommendation that we put a committee together to study the needs of the police department, both now and ongoing, and perhaps look at a joint public safety building.
And Norwell just did that, actually.
Yeah. So a lot of towns have done it a lot. a number of towns who are building new facilities are doing that. What are your thoughts about his recommendation, and should we go forward with a committee? And how do you feel about a jointly shared facility?
I do. I agree. I think we need, it would be nice to have a committee to look at it. I've got no problem at all with a joint facility. We get, all the officers work incredibly well with the fire department. We see them on every single call we go to, the medical or fire related. We stop into the fire stations. We have a very good working relationship with them. I don't think there'd be any issues with a combined police and fire station or a public safety center at all.
The 2 exercises that you did, I thought they were very well done.
Thank you.
You certainly did a great job on the opiate one.
Oh, thank you very much.
A lot of research there, which demonstrates your ability, your technical ability. On the 1-hour exercise, can you talk a little bit about that and your philosophy on how you did the reduction?
Sure.
Just the fact that you were time constrained also?
Yeah, it was obviously difficult with the hour that we were given, but how I did it, is that what you're looking for?
Kind of. What was your approach, and how did you attack the 3%?
So we were given a budget with all the different line items between personnel and other expenses. I transferred that to Excel, put it in an Excel sheet, calculated the sums of those columns and the total budget, and then did the 3% reduction on that total budget, which I think was 100 and something thousand reduction. So with that, I took that reduction and took it out of the different, the salary area was really the only place you could feasibly take money, because everything else you'd devastate that budget completely if you took anything out of it. So I looked at it purely from like an analytical standpoint, where I took that total from each of the budget lines and calculated which one it would have the least impact on. I think the least impact was the full-time wages. It ended up only being a 4% impact on that. The next closest, I believe, was 29% impact, and that was education, I believe, which, as you can tell, I don't think we should touch that. I think the officer education is critical. And then beyond that was the overtime budget, and if you took it from that, you were wiping out, I think it was close to 40%.
Yes.
So a 4% reduction in the full-time salary, I think, was the most logical place to take it from. And again, I didn't have the time, but if I did, maybe I would have reduced that a little bit and taken some from some other areas. But with the time I had and the problem I had in front of me, I just took the area that it would sting the least. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One last question. If you could describe yourself in 3 words, what would they be?
3 words, huh? I'd say dedicated, conscientious, and maybe, I don't know, enthusiastic.
Good ones.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. And
You're
is there any, before you run off,
It's past my dinner time now, I think.
is there anything else you'd like us to know about you, or you'd like us to tell us?
Oh, I think we covered it, pretty much everything, between the resume, the exercises we did, and the discussion we had tonight. So I think you have a pretty good feel of who I am and how much this department means to me, and how much I want to be a part of its future.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you very much.
Good job.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, I'd say we have our work cut out for us. They're amazing. All 4 men that we saw tonight. You have 4 different personalities, but extremely accomplished. And the people that are coming up behind them, the younger officers, we have a very bright future for policing in this town. And they deserve every bit of our support that we can give them. So over the next week, we're hoping to, next week on the 16th, come back and vote in one of the 4 that you've seen tonight as the new chief. Yep.
Yes, an awesome responsibility, but a wonderful opportunity.
I know, it's so sad losing Mike, but he's going to be awfully happy in retirement up in New Hampshire, having a good time and traveling. But this was well worth the time, and I think we'll go back to David Basler and tell him we needed a tad bit more than a half an hour. But it was, I agree with you, Paul, it was well worth it.
And it wasn't surprising to me that of the caliber, but some of them I didn't know or see as much, but I was just so impressed by not only the credentials, but the character and their dedication and commitment, not only to the police force, but to the town. So I was very, very happy to see, and I think we're in good shape no matter who makes it.
One of the things that impressed me is all 4 of the essays that were written. And they're all different. They all reflected the personalities that you saw tonight. But all 4 of them were excellent. Absolutely excellent. So with that, we have no appointments tonight?
You do not. You have a reserve fund transfer, a one-day license, remaining business.
Okay. Shall we do how about the reserve fund transfer, Ted?
Sure. That is a reserve fund transfer for the fire department, specifically for fire hydrants. It's in the amount of $40,000. The package is, the transfer's in your file. Ordinarily, we wait on transfers, especially this time of year till we get towards the end of the year. We ask departments to make it up out of their budget. Problem with this one is that these are broken fire hydrants that occurred throughout the storm, and we really need to get them in service right away. Some of those locations,
Lincoln Street.
It could be damaging to the residences if we had an incident there and we didn't have a fire hydrant. So Mark has identified these, and he has begun working on replacing them.
That's excellent. Questions, gentlemen?
None.
Nope. I'll take a motion.
Move that we recommend a transfer from the reserve fund to capital outlay fire hydrants in the amount of $40,000.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And the liquor license, the one-day license, who's got that one?
You'll have in your packet, so
Okay.
it's pretty straightforward. I don't know if Betty or Sharon, you took it from the office, you want to give any details?
They did the same license last year. It rained all weekend.
Does this license include rain? As long as it's not snow. Okay, so I'll take a motion.
I'll move to approve the issuance of a special one-day wine and malt beverage liquor license to Donna Haggard.
Okay.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ted, any reports?
Randy will have detailed reports for us on snow removal. He has had to incorporate some additional items due to the snow damage. Specifically, claims from residences are a little larger than we had expected, and he's managing through that. Remind residents that if they have a claim, they can send it to the town accountant's office, and Randy will get a copy of that at the DPW.
What should they send? Just a write-up, an insurance? a
Really,
bill?
just most claims are for property damage. Most people have already contacted their insurance companies, and they have some type of write-up, and then they send that along to us, and then we'll take a look at it, try to make a determination.
Okay.
And then lastly, I'll let you know with good news that I heard just this afternoon that the state is going to undertake and fully fund the study of George Washington Boulevard and Summer Street all the way to the Rotary. They're going to fund that study, something that Roger Fernandez, we got to give Roger credit here. He's been working with Pam Hasner at Mass DOT, and they've gotten the attention of the folks up in Boston, and they have approved full funding for that study to go forward, start commencing immediately.
Good.
What does full funding mean?
Meaning that they have all the funding in place to do all the work related to the study. They're not looking for, sometimes we get these ideas where we've got an allocation, but the allocation has to follow some bond bill that may or may not ever get done or released. So in this case, they have the funding capacity, and they're going to actually begin the work of studying that corridor. So I think that's outstanding, and really is the precursor to getting any significant funding from the state to repair or make improvements to that roadway. So I think that's a great
So-
positive bit of news.
Is that going to be like from the road audit that was done like a year or so ago?
No, it's actually completely separate and above and beyond, and it'll eclipse that to some extent. Pam has, they'll have that data. She spoke to me today about it, and they identified the things they've done interimly, but this will be a much broader study.
Excellent. Well, that's great news.
Yes.
Super. Anything?
Couple things. You got anything?
I have one thing, but I can go first, it's going to be really quick. It's a little extra beyond the community per se, but anybody who is interested in hockey, Providence College defeated Nebraska in the semifinals 4-1, so they'll be hopefully playing BU in the NCAA Frozen Four Finals in Boston on Saturday, so
This Saturday?
as a friar, I'm very happy. And I know there's plenty of friars in town, so just...
Oh, that's awesome.
A lot of fryers,
That's awesome.
So as a BU grad, I guess I can go with you
Yes.
to that game.
We just need tickets.
I bet those tickets are going to be hard to get.
But it would be nice to have an all-East final. It's not always realistic, but we have a chance now.
That's right.
Nebraska, really?
Well, they have a good program, but they've been building it for quite some time, but they did all right. They obviously made it this far.
I got a couple things, but you go ahead.
Sure. Last week, we had a discussion at the public comment relative to the Pocahontas trailer park down off of Rockland Street. And I just want to make it extremely clear to the residents, and the Pocahontas residents in particular, that there's no slam being made on the people that live there. They're decent people. I lived in that area myself for many years. I knew people who lived there. I did get further information about what's going on there, so I have a much clearer understanding. There were some comments that perhaps were interpreted the wrong way. I just want to make sure that nobody's taking away, the suggestion that the people who live there are any less important than anybody else in this town. Affordability and the ability to live in this town comes in all different forms. So I just don't want that horse to leave the corral, so to speak. The only other thing I want to say is I still want to address the Betty Foley letter. It's late. We're not doing it tonight. I'd ask that it be put on the agenda again for next week. It's a difficult conversation, perhaps, but it doesn't have to be long. But I just think we need to clear the air going forward. I saw a letter in the Journal today, and I was troubled by it, but I think we can get through it.
I don't think there's anything, we'll put it on the agenda,
Good.
but I
Let's
think
do
we've
it.
been very clear about the conduct of the people coming before us. So certainly. I have a couple things. The SNAP summer program that is at the country club is open for enrollment. We're expecting a large number of children this year. It's a program in July. If you're interested, go up to, on the internet, hinghamsports.com, and then click on SNAP. It'll be bowling, golf, and tennis, and a few surprises this year for the kids. We're planning a really great summer program. And surprised you didn't mention it. Tony Messina, Coach of the Year.
Oh, yeah.
You're slipping. So congratulations, Tony. Awesome.
I
Awesome.
congratulate him at the comedy show, and he well deserved, but you're right. I should-
He's a very
I saved
humble
that for you.
man. Thank you. He's a very humble man, but he is one heck of a coach. And then we won't read the names, but we had 27 students that were named 2014-15 Patriot League All-Star Student Athletes. So that's a number of kids. That's really awesome. There's 27 of them.
Fantastic.
So with that, that's all I have.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for sitting through the interviews.
Are you going to wait for a second, or are you?
Second.
Second,
Right
all in
there.
favor?
All right.
Aye.
Good night.
Good night.